There is one sentence you may be speaking that cancels divine supply before it reaches your hands. It does not sound dangerous. It does not sound like a rejection of God or the universe. It sounds reasonable, grounded, and emotionally honest. It sounds like something a responsible person would say when facing a difficult financial reality. And yet Florence Scovel Shinn, one of the great masters of spiritual prosperity, taught that every word spoken with belief becomes a creative order, and a fear sentence repeated in the presence of lack does not merely describe your condition. It commands it. This is what no one warned you about. You have been praying for supply, asking for provision, affirming your faith, and then, in the very next breath, speaking a sentence that cancels the agreement your prayer established. You have been placing the order and sending the cancellation at the same time. You have been asking the source to open a door while your words keep closing it. This teaching will show you the sentence, name its structure, diagnose its cost, and give you the exact replacement that restores your agreement with divine supply. Stay with this. What you are about to hear may be the most important correction you have received in years. You have said it more times than you realize. You have sat in prayer, spoken words of trust, declared that God provides, that the universe supports you, that supply is on the way, and then within minutes, sometimes within seconds, you have said something like, "I will never have enough," or "I do not know how I am going to survive this," or "Nothing ever comes through for me." You said both sentences in the same day, sometimes in the same hour, and you did not recognize the contradiction because the second sentence felt true. It felt like you were simply reporting what the visible world was showing you. But reporting fear as final authority is not honesty. It is agreement, and every agreement carries consequences. Consider what this looks like from the inside. You wake in the morning with genuine faith. You remind yourself that divine supply is real, that channels exist beyond what you can see, that the source has never truly abandoned anyone who trusted. And then you open your bank account, or you check your inbox, or you count the days until a bill is due, and the fear sentence rises. It has a familiar voice. It sounds like your own. It sounds calm, measured, and wise. It says, "Nothing is coming." It says, "This is not going to work." It says, "I already knew this would fail." And because it sounds like wisdom rather than fear, you let it pass through your mouth without interruption, and the order is placed. This is the pain that Florence Scovel Shinn spent her life addressing. Not the pain of poverty itself, but the pain of a soul that genuinely believes in divine supply and yet keeps speaking sentences that declare its absence. The viewer who prays with faith in the morning and cancels that faith with words by afternoon is not a person without belief. They are a person whose belief has not yet been protected by a disciplined mouth. They are a person who has been told to trust but never shown how the spoken word operates as a spiritual agreement. That teaching begins now. Florence Scovel Shinn was not a theorist. She was a practitioner who counseled real people through real financial crises, through loss, through paralysis, through seasons where visible supply had completely dried up. She taught that the spoken word is not decoration for faith. The spoken word is the instrument through which faith either opens the channel of receiving or closes it. She understood with a precision few teachers have matched that words do not merely follow belief. Words also create belief. Words strengthen whatever inner agreement they repeat. And a fear sentence spoken daily, spoken with conviction, spoken over every appearance of delay or difficulty, becomes a standing order against the very supply the speaker has been asking for. What Shinn taught, and what this channel preserves, is not a system of magical phrases or positive thinking formulas. It is a serious spiritual law. Words carry spiritual authority. They agree either with source or with appearance. They either declare divine supply or they cancel it. They either open the receiver or contract them. And the tragic irony that Shinn identified was that the most dangerous sentences are not the obviously despairing ones. The most dangerous sentences are the ones that sound honest, realistic, and emotionally responsible while carrying a hidden agreement with lack. Those are the sentences that cancel supply most quietly and most consistently. This teaching carries a single promise, and it is this: by the time you have received this teaching fully, you will be able to identify the fear sentence you most commonly speak, Understand why it cancels divine supply, interrupt it the moment it rises, and replace it with a spoken order that restores your agreement with the source. You do not need to achieve perfect speech. You do not need to erase every doubt in a single day. But you do need to understand what has been happening beneath the surface of your prayers, and you need the correction that Shinn's law makes available. That correction is here. That correction begins now. The visible world is a provocateur. It does not present evidence of supply when supply is forming invisibly. It presents closed accounts, unanswered messages, delayed checks, unpaid bills, and silent phones. It presents conditions that seem to demand a response, and the response the fearful mind reaches for first is always a sentence. The sentence becomes a report of what the eye can see. And because the eye sees lack, the sentence declares lack, and the declaration becomes the inner agreement that the law of mind begins to honor. This is the visible supply trap. You speak what you see, and what you speak becomes what you keep seeing. When the bank account drops below a number that feels safe, the sentence comes quickly. I am broke. Not a temporary condition exists that supply can correct. Not the source has channels I cannot yet see. But I am broke. The sentence does not merely describe a condition, it declares an identity. It says, this is who I am, this is what I have, this is the state of my receiving. And the law of words, as Shinn taught it, does not distinguish between a description and a declaration. Both carry the same creative authority, both send the same signal, both place the same order. When a bill arrives, a second sentence follows. I cannot handle this, not divine supply is moving to meet this need. Not the source knows what is required and the channel is forming, but I cannot handle this. The sentence speaks impossibility over the very situation that divine supply was designed to address. And here is what must be understood. The source does not stop providing because a bill appears. The source stops finding agreement in you when your words declare that the need is beyond supply's reach. The sentence, I cannot handle this, is not a call for help. It is a closing of the door through which help was already moving. When a delay appears, when the expected provision does not come on the schedule the mind constructed, the fear sentence rises again. Nothing is coming. These three words are among the most powerful cancellation orders the human mouth can speak. Nothing is coming. It forecloses on the invisible. It declares that the channel is not merely delayed, but absent. It removes from the field of receiving every supply that has not yet become visible. And because it is spoken in a tone of certainty, in a voice that sounds like finally accepting the truth, it carries tremendous authority inside the inner agreement. The order is heard. The order is processed. The receiving contracts. When a door closes, whether it is a job that did not come through, a contract that fell apart, a relationship that did not provide what was expected, the fear sentence arrives dressed as a verdict. I knew this would fail. This sentence is particularly destructive because it reaches backward in time. It says not only that the present is disappointing, but that the past already confirmed this outcome, and therefore the future is sealed. It is a sentence that gives the fear full authority over time itself, past, present, and future, sealing them together into a single declaration of inevitable lack. Shinn would have recognized this immediately as an agreement with failure dressed in the language of self-awareness. When silence follows a prayer, when the visible world offers no sign, no confirmation, no immediate evidence that the order has been received, the fear sentence says, I am abandoned. This sentence touches something deeper than money. It speaks to the soul's relationship with Source. It says, I called and was not answered. I trusted and was not supplied. I believed and was left alone. And while this sentence feels like a wound rather than an order, it functions as both. It wounds the inner agreement that divine supply requires to flow, and it orders more silence, more absence, more confirmation of abandonment. The source has not gone silent. The sentence has declared silence, and silence is what the agreement now expects. When uncertainty stretches longer than the mind can tolerate, when no visible route to supply appears, the sentence says, there is no way. And this is among the most quietly catastrophic sentences the receiver can speak, because it is the sentence that speaks directly against the invisible mechanism of divine supply. The source does not work through ways you have already mapped. The source works through ways you have not yet imagined. When you say there is no way, you are not describing the source's limitations. You are describing the mind's limitations and granting them final authority. You are allowing the absence of a visible map to become the declared absence of a route. But the route was never yours to see in advance. It was only yours to trust. What must be understood, and understood with great seriousness, is that each of these sentences feels like a report. It feels like you are simply saying what is true. But Shinn's law does not recognize the difference between a report and a declaration, because inside the creative field of spoken faith, every word spoken with belief becomes an agreement. A report spoken with conviction is an order. A description spoken with certainty is a command. You are not merely observing your reality when you speak these sentences. You are instructing it, and the instruction you have been repeating across days and weeks and months and sometimes years has been placing a standing order against the very supply you ask for in prayer. That order must be interrupted. That agreement must be broken. And the breaking begins with recognizing exactly what you have been saying and why. If you are ready to stop canceling supply with fear, if you are ready to interrupt the sentence that has been working against your receiving, then let your comment be your first spoken order. Write in the comments right now, divine supply is active. This is not a mechanical engagement. This is a new spoken agreement. This is you placing a fresh order with the field of receiving, declaring with your written word what your mouth must learn to declare with your spoken word. Let this comment be the first interruption of the fear sentence. Let it be the first time today that you agreed with supply instead of declaring its absence. The comment you are about to write is not just participation in this teaching. It is a practice of the very law being revealed here. Florence Scovel Shinn understood that the spoken and written word both carry the authority of agreement. When you write, divine supply is active. You are training your inner agreement to align with supply rather than with the fear that has been canceling it. Write it now. Let the first new sentence begin here before anything in your visible world has changed, before the bank account shifts, before the channel opens visibly, before any proof appears. This is what faith as spoken order looks like. Write it, mean it, and stay with this teaching, because what comes next will show you exactly how deep the fear sentence has been running. The cost of a repeated fear sentence is not merely words. The cost is a slow erosion of the inner state from which divine supply can flow. Faith is not simply a belief held in silence. Faith is an active inner agreement, a posture of expectation, an openness of the receiving field. And every time a fear sentence rises and passes through the mouth unchallenged, that posture weakens. The field of receiving contracts. The expectation shifts from supply to lack. And what began as a single fearful sentence becomes, over time, the dominant inner climate of the person asking for provision. The first thing fear sentences destroy is the stability of faith. Shinn taught that faith must be consistent to be effective. Not perfect, but consistent. Not free of doubt, but dominant over doubt. When the fear sentence repeats daily, faith becomes a wave that rises in the morning and crashes by noon. The viewer believes when they pray. They disbelieve when they see the visible world. They believe again when they read a scripture or a teaching. They disbelieve again when the bill is still there. And this oscillation is not merely an emotional experience. It is a creative one. Every swing between faith and fear sends a contradictory order into the field of receiving. And the field cannot build a coherent channel from contradictory instructions. The second cost is prayer that is immediately contradicted. You speak the prayer and then you speak the fear. You ask for supply and then you declare its absence. You say God provides and then you say nothing ever works for me. And these two sentences do not merely coexist in your day. They actively cancel each other within the law of spoken agreement. Your prayer is real. Your faith in the moment of prayer is genuine. But the fear sentence that follows holds the field of receiving in contradiction, and a contradicted field does not deliver cleanly. What you are praying for is being undermined by what you are saying after you pray. The third cost is carried in the body itself. A fear sentence does not pass through the mind without touching the nervous system. When you say, "I will never have enough," the body believes it. The shoulders tighten, the chest contracts, the breath shortens. The body enters a state of threat, and in that state of threat, the receiving field further narrows. You stop noticing opportunity because the body is scanning for danger, not for provision. You stop hearing the quiet guidance of the source because the fear sentence has set the nervous system into a frequency that cannot receive subtle direction. The body becomes a closed door, and closed doors receive nothing. The fourth cost is the gradual expectation of lack. The mind learns from repetition. It does not ask whether the sentence being repeated is true. It builds its predictions from what is spoken most consistently. And when the fear sentence has been repeated thousands of times across months and years, the mind begins to expect its contents as the natural outcome of any financial situation. It begins to recognize lack as home. It begins to treat supply as the exception, as something surprising or temporary, as something that might be taken away before it can be trusted. The mind that expects lack cannot fully receive supply, because receiving requires expectation of supply, not bracing for its absence. The fifth cost is that channels of supply go unrecognized, unseen, or actively rejected. The viewer who has spoken, "Nothing is coming," does not notice when something begins to come. They have trained their perception to confirm the sentence. So when a small opening appears, when a quiet opportunity presents itself, when a person offers unexpected assistance, the fear sentence rises again and interprets the channel through its own lens. This is nothing. This cannot work. This is not enough. And the channel that was beginning to form is dismissed, rejected, or ignored, not because it was genuinely insufficient, but because the fear sentence made the viewer incapable of recognizing supply in an unfamiliar form. The sixth cost is that help itself becomes suspect. When the fear sentence says, "I am not supported," it shapes the viewer's response to people who attempt to provide support. Offers of help are viewed with suspicion. Acts of generosity are interpreted as traps. Opportunities from unexpected sources are treated as illusions rather than channels. The viewer who has spoken enough fear sentences around support becomes, paradoxically, unable to receive the support that was already moving toward them. They push away the very thing they prayed for because the fear sentence convinced them that what is arriving cannot be what they asked for. The seventh cost is the habit of speaking defeat over opportunity. When an opening appears, a door, a possibility, a new direction, the fear sentence rushes in to pronounce a verdict before the door has even been tested. I knew this would fail. This is not going to work either. Nothing ever changes for me. And these sentences are spoken before any action is taken, before any result is known, before any evidence of failure exists. They are preemptive declarations of defeat. They are orders placed in advance against the supply that was moving through that very channel. And because the sentence is spoken with the full weight of personal experience, with the accumulated evidence of past disappointments, it carries tremendous authority. It stops the receiver before the receiving even begins. The eighth cost is the unconscious training of defeat expectation across time. Every fear sentence you speak writes a line in the agreement you hold with the financial future. You are not merely experiencing disappointment, you are authoring it. You are writing the story of your financial life, one fear sentence at a time. And the story you keep writing is the story the source must work against rather than through. The outer life does not only reflect the inner state. The outer life reflects the inner agreement that the spoken word has been building sentence by sentence, day by day, for years. This is the gravity of what Shinn taught. This is why interrupting the fear sentence is not a spiritual luxury, it is a spiritual emergency. The ninth cost is the feeling of abandonment by source. When a person has spoken enough sentences that declare absence, they eventually come to feel that the source itself is absent. They lose not merely their financial peace, but their spiritual foundation. They begin to question whether divine supply was ever real, whether faith was ever warranted, whether the promise they built their hope on was genuine. And this is perhaps the deepest cost of the fear sentence. It does not only cancel financial supply, it erodes the soul's trust in the source itself. It makes the very relationship between the receiver and the giver feel broken. And a broken relationship with source is the most expensive condition any person seeking prosperity can inhabit. The 10th cost, the final one to name here, is that the viewer does not notice they keep agreeing with absence. The fear sentence becomes so natural, so automatic, so habitual, that it no longer registers as a choice. It rises and is spoken before the mind has time to intercept it. It is woven into the daily language of the person's relationship with money, with supply, with receiving, with themselves. They do not hear it as an order. They hear it as the truth. And this is what Shinn's law of words was designed to interrupt, not by pretending the visible world is different from what it appears to be, but by insisting that the visible world is not the final authority, and that the spoken word must agree with a law higher than what the eye can currently confirm. The cost of not making this correction is another year of speaking against the supply that is already, even now, trying to find its way to you. Florence Scovel Shinn did not teach positive thinking. She taught the creative law of the spoken word, and there is a profound difference between the two. Positive thinking is a psychological practice of managing mental attitudes. The law of the spoken word, as Shinn articulated it, is a spiritual principle that operates whether you are aware of it or not, whether you intend it or not, whether you believe it or not. Every word spoken with sincere feeling is a creative agreement. It is not a suggestion to the source, it is a direction to the inner field of your own receiving, and that direction shapes what can come to you, through what channels it can arrive, and whether the door of receiving stands open or closed. The first thing Shinn taught about words is that they carry the power to bless. A word spoken in faith, in trust, in alignment with divine supply creates an opening. It prepares the receiver. It signals expectation. It agrees with a law higher than the visible world. When you speak supply before supply is visible, when you say the way is opening, before the way has appeared, when you say divine supply is active, before the bank account has changed, you are not lying. You are agreeing with a law that operates before visible results appear. You are speaking from the invisible reality of divine supply rather than the temporary appearance of visible lack. And that agreement is creative. It opens channels. It prepares the ground for delivery. The second thing Shinn taught is that words carry the power to curse. This is the teaching that most students of spiritual prosperity resist, because it carries a weight of responsibility they are not always ready for. But Shinn was not speaking in theological metaphor when she said this. She was speaking from observed experience. A word spoken repeatedly in fear, in resignation, in agreement with lack, creates a closing. It contracts the receiver. It signals to the inner field of agreement that supply is not expected, not trusted, not allowed, and the field responds accordingly. The curse is not a supernatural punishment. It is a natural consequence. The spoken order is honored, and a fear sentence, spoken with enough conviction and consistency, becomes an honored order against your own supply. The third law Shinn taught is that words open receiving. The mouth aligned with divine supply prepares the soul to receive what it is asking for. When the spoken word agrees with source, the inner state relaxes, the body opens, the perception widens, the receiver begins to notice channels that the fear state made invisible. Opportunities appear that the contracted state could not recognize. People seem to arrive at the right moment. Messages that would have been dismissed are now answered. Doors that seemed closed are tested and found to be open after all. The word of faith does not create supply from nothing. Supply already exists in the invisible realm. The word of faith creates the agreement through which invisible supply can flow into the visible experience of the person speaking. The fourth law is that words close receiving. A fear sentence, even spoken quietly, even spoken only in the privacy of the mind's inner voice before it reaches the lips, begins to close the receiving field. When spoken aloud, it hardens that closing into a declared agreement, and the body responds to a declared agreement with immediate physical confirmation. The chest tightens, the throat contracts, the mind narrows its field of perception, and the person who has just spoken a closing sentence finds, to their confusion, that supply seems to have moved further away rather than closer. They do not make the connection. They see supply retreating and speak another fear sentence in response, tightening the closing further, reducing the receiving field further, creating a cycle of declaration and contraction that feels impossible to exit. The fifth truth in Shinn's teaching is that words reveal belief. You do not merely speak what you think, you speak what you believe. and what you believe about your relationship with supply, about your worthiness to receive, about whether the source truly supports you, about whether money can come in unexpected ways. All of this is encoded in the sentences you reach for automatically when financial pressure appears. The fear sentence is not just a bad habit. It is a confession. It reveals the inner agreement that has been governing your receiving field beneath the surface of your conscious prayers. And the spiritual practitioner who wants to change their outer life must begin by listening to what their own mouth confesses when the pressure is on. The sixth law is that words strengthen belief. This is perhaps the most important mechanical truth in Shinn's entire body of teaching, because it means that speaking the fear sentence does not merely reflect an existing inner agreement. It deepens it. It confirms it. It adds evidence to it. Every time you say nothing is coming, the inner agreement with absence grows stronger. Every time you say, I will never have enough, the poverty agreement settles deeper into the receiving field. The sentence does not just describe the belief. The sentence trains the belief into permanence. And this is why interrupting the fear sentence is urgent, not because one sentence destroys everything, but because each uninterrupted sentence strengthens the agreement that is blocking the supply you are praying for. The seventh law Shinn taught, and the one that forms the heart of this entire teaching, is that words must align with divine supply. Not after supply is visible, not after the proof is in hand, not after the fear is gone, before. The spoken word must reach agreement with divine supply before the evidence appears, because the agreement is what allows the evidence to appear. This is faith operating as a spoken law, not as a passive emotion. Faith, in Shinn's teaching, is an active command. It is a word placed into the field of receiving that says, supply is real, supply is coming, supply is active, supply is mine. And that word, held consistently, spoken frequently, protected from cancellation by fear sentences, becomes the standing agreement that divine supply honors with delivery. The eighth and final law in this section is this: words must be guarded. Shinn taught her students to treat the spoken word with the same seriousness that a builder treats a foundation. You do not place a careful foundation and then randomly remove stones. You do not spend an hour in prayer and then spend the rest of the day speaking sentences that contradict it. The word must be guarded, not with anxiety, not with paranoia, but with a calm, practiced awareness that says, my words are orders, and I choose which orders I place. This is the spiritual discipline at the center of Shinn's entire method. Not perfect speech, not the absence of fear, but the willingness to catch the fear sentence, interrupt it, and replace it with a word that agrees with the source. That practice is what this teaching is building toward. There is a belief you may be carrying right now, and it sounds like this: I'm just saying what is true. You say the fear sentence not because you want to cancel supply, but because you feel obligated to honesty, to realism, to not pretending that the visible situation is better than it appears. And this feels like wisdom. It feels like maturity. It feels like the responsible thing to do, to look at the numbers clearly, to admit that the channel has been silent, to say what the visible world is showing without embellishment or spiritual performance. But here is what Shinn's law confronts directly. You have confused the appearance of a thing with its final authority. A temporary condition seen without the eyes of faith is not the truth. It is one layer of a reality that has not yet fully arrived. Never give a temporary appearance permanent authority through your mouth. This is the corrective law. The bank account is a snapshot of a moving supply, not the verdict of the source. The closed door is one door in a hallway of many, not the final word on whether supply can arrive. The delayed channel is a channel in motion, not an absence of supply. But when you speak the fear sentence, you grant the snapshot the authority of a verdict. You take a temporary appearance and with your mouth make it permanent. You say this is what is and this is what will be, and nothing in the invisible realm has the power to contradict what my visible world is currently showing. That is not honesty. That is the granting of ultimate authority to a temporary condition that the source is already in the process of changing. Consider what it means to make lack official with your words. There is a difference between privately acknowledging a difficulty and publicly declaring its permanence through your mouth. Shinn was not asking her students to pretend. She was asking them to recognize the difference between a passing cloud and a declared climate. A passing cloud is something you observe without attaching your future to it. A declared climate is something you speak over your life as the settled condition you expect to inhabit permanently. When you say, "Nothing ever works for me," you have not reported a passing cloud. You have declared a climate. You have given the appearance of recurring failure the authority of a law. And the inner field of agreement begins to treat that declared climate as the stable operating condition from which all future predictions will be made. The belief that the fear sentence is simply honest reporting is itself a fear. It is the fear of hoping and being disappointed. It is safer emotionally to predict failure, because if failure arrives, you were prepared for it. And if supply arrives, it feels like a bonus rather than a disappointment. This strategy feels intelligent. It feels like emotional protection, but Shinn's law exposes it as something else entirely. It is protection purchased at the price of receiving. You protect yourself from the pain of disappointed hope by agreeing with absence, and in agreeing with absence, you make absence more likely. The fear sentence does not protect you from disappointment. It agrees with the very outcome you most fear and trains the receiving field to confirm it. You may also carry the belief that speaking faith before evidence is dishonest. That saying, "divine supply is active when the account is empty," is a kind of lie, a spiritual performance, a pretense that does not respect the seriousness of the situation. But this misunderstands what a faith sentence is. A faith sentence is not a description of what the visible world is currently showing. It is a declaration of the law that governs what the visible world is capable of becoming. When you say, "divine supply is active," you are not denying the bank account. You are refusing to give the bank account authority over the invisible supply that the source is already directing toward you. You are placing a spoken order with a reality deeper than the one the eye can currently measure. That is not dishonesty. That is the highest form of spiritual precision. The disruption Shinn offers is this: your words are not neutral. They are not innocent observers of reality. They are participants in the creation of it. Every sentence you speak is either agreeing with supply or agreeing with absence. There is no neutral sentence in the field of receiving. And once you understand this, the obligation to speak carelessly, to say whatever the fear triggers, to repeat the sentence that has been cancelling supply because it sounds honest, that obligation falls away. You are not required to obey the fear sentence. You are not obligated to give it your voice. The sentence rose, but you choose whether it speaks. And the correction of the fear sentence begins the moment you recognize that choosing otherwise is not denial of reality. It is command over what reality will become. There is one more false belief to disrupt here, and it is perhaps the most stubborn: the belief that what you have been speaking cannot really be the problem, that the real problem is visible, external, and beyond the control of your words. That the economy is the problem, or the employer, or the market, or the timing, or the circumstances. And while external conditions are real, while the visible world presents genuine challenges, Shinn's law does not say that your words created every external condition you face. It says that your words determine whether you can receive supply in the midst of every external condition you face. The economy does not have to change for divine supply to move toward you. The circumstances do not have to become favorable before your receiving field can open. But the fear sentence must stop, because the fear sentence contracts the receiving field in any circumstance, in any economy, in any season. The words are not the only variable, but they are the variable you can change right now, today, before anything else shifts. The fear sentence sounds wise. It sounds realistic. It sounds like the voice of a person who has learned from experience not to expect too much. But Shinn's teaching calls it by its true name: an agreement with absence spoken by a soul who is afraid of being disappointed again. And the correction is not to pretend the disappointment did not happen. The correction is to stop letting past disappointment write the sentence your future must obey. The past appointed its sentence to your history. Your future belongs to a different law. And that law says divine supply is active. The channel is forming, the way is opening, and your words must now agree with what the invisible realm has already authorized. There is a specific structure to the fear sentence that cancels divine supply, And you need to be able to recognize it no matter what words it wears on any given day, because the fear sentence is not always the same sentence. It changes its clothing depending on the situation, the pressure, the appearance that provoked it, and the person speaking it. But beneath the surface variation, the structure is the same. And once you learn to recognize that structure, you will never again let it pass through your mouth unchallenged. We will name that structure precisely in a later section of this teaching. But before we arrive there, you need to understand why the structure is so hard to recognize and why it has survived so long unchallenged inside your inner agreement. The first thing to know about the fear sentence is that it usually begins with a report of lack. It begins with something the visible world has confirmed: a number too low, a door too closed, a silence too long, a delay too extended. And because it begins with something real, something verifiably present in the visible world, the rest of the sentence feels justified. The conclusion feels earned. If the bank account is genuinely low, then saying "I will never have enough" feels like a logical extension of visible evidence. The sentence does not feel like a fear creation. It feels like a reasonable deduction, but the deduction contains the error. The error is the move from what is visible now to what is therefore permanent and inevitable. That move is the fear sentence's hidden mechanism. The second characteristic of the fear sentence is that it sounds factual. It does not sound emotional. It does not sound like panic. It sounds calm, measured, and based in observable reality. This is why it escapes the spiritual guard so often. You do not intercept it because it does not feel like fear. It feels like clear thinking. But calm delivery does not neutralize the creative authority of a spoken agreement. A fear sentence delivered in a steady voice carries the same creative weight as one delivered in tears. The tone does not change the order. The content of the agreement is what the field of receiving honors. And a fear sentence delivered calmly and consistently is perhaps more dangerous than one delivered in obvious emotional distress, because the calm version carries greater conviction, and conviction is what gives the order its authority. The third characteristic is that the fear sentence predicts failure. It is not merely a report of what is, it projects its conclusions into the future. Nothing is coming becomes nothing will come. I cannot handle this becomes I will never be able to handle this. I have never had enough becomes I will never have enough. The fear sentence uses present evidence to seal the future. It employs the visible to govern the invisible. And because the future belongs to the invisible realm, belongs to the domain of divine supply and creative law, this is precisely where the sentence does its most significant damage. It speaks a verdict over a future that the source has not yet closed. It declares the ending of a story that has not yet been fully told. The fourth characteristic is that the fear sentence gives fear authority. Not just authority over the present moment, but authority over the speaking person's identity in relation to supply. When you say "I will never have enough," you are not just making a financial prediction. You are defining yourself as a person who does not receive enough. You are placing your identity in agreement with insufficiency. And identity is the deepest level of the receiving field. What you believe you are determines what you allow to come to you. A person who identifies as someone who never has enough will find it very difficult to fully receive supply even when it arrives, because the supply contradicts their self-definition, and the inner field will find ways to make the supply temporary, to lose it, to dismiss it, to explain it away as an exception, rather than evidence of a new normal. The fifth characteristic is that the fear sentence repeats under pressure. When visible circumstances tighten, when the pressure increases, when the window of time for provision shortens, the fear sentence becomes louder and more frequent. It reaches for the mouth faster. It bypasses the spiritual discipline the receiver has been trying to build. It arrives in the urgency of the moment before the faith declaration can be formed. And the repetition under pressure is exactly when the fear sentence does its greatest damage, because pressure is also the moment when the receiving field is most sensitive, when the inner agreement matters most, when the spoken order carries its highest creative authority. The fear sentence knows to arrive in the pressure. The spiritual discipline must be strong enough to intercept it there. The sixth characteristic is that the fear sentence contracts the receiver. After it is spoken, something closes. The body tightens, the mind narrows. The emotional field contracts into a defensive posture, and in that contracted state, the receiver cannot recognize the channels that are still moving toward them. The small opening goes unnoticed. The unexpected offer seems irrelevant. The quiet guidance of the source is drowned out by the urgency of the declared lack. Contraction is not just an emotional state, it is a perceptual one. A contracted receiver sees a contracted world, and a contracted world appears to offer no supply, which triggers another fear sentence, which deepens the contraction further. The cycle is broken only by the interruption of the fear sentence before it speaks. The seventh characteristic is that the fear sentence cancels the spoken prayer that preceded it. Shinn was precise about this. She taught that a prayer spoken in the morning is a creative agreement placed with the field of divine supply, and a fear sentence spoken that afternoon is a cancellation order sent to the same field. The field receives both instructions, and when a cancellation follows an order, the field cannot complete a clean delivery. It receives contradiction. It receives send supply, and then do not send supply. It receives I trust, and then I do not trust. And the channel that was beginning to form in response to the prayer cannot fully develop in the presence of a standing cancellation order. The prayer was real, the faith was genuine, but the fear sentence undid the agreement that the prayer had established. The eighth thing to know, the thing that creates the open loop this section must hold, is that the structure of the fear sentence can be named, and once it is named, it can always be recognized. It does not matter what specific words the sentence uses. The structure is identifiable, and once you can see the structure, you will realize that you have been speaking variations of the same sentence in dozens of different situations, with dozens of different words, and that all of them have been placing the same kind of order against the same field of divine supply. The name of that structure is coming. We will arrive at it in precise detail later in this teaching, but right now your work is to begin noticing, when the pressure comes today, which sentence rises first. Do not answer yet, only begin to listen, because the sentence you notice rising is the first one we are about to interrupt together. Divine supply does not operate the way a visible paycheck operates. It does not arrive on a schedule determined by your employer, your contract, your invoice, or your bank's processing timeline. It operates through the law of inner agreement, through the alignment of the receiver's spoken word and inner state with the invisible field of provision that the source maintains continuously and without interruption. This is not metaphor. This is the operating mechanism that Shinn spent her life explaining and demonstrating. Supply is real before it is visible. Channels are forming before they are apparent. The delivery is authorized before the package is in hand, and the receiver's inner agreement, shaped significantly by the spoken word, either welcomes that delivery or interrupts it. The process begins with the asking. You ask for supply. You pray, you declare, you hold a need before the source and request provision. This asking, when it is sincere and held in genuine expectation, initiates a movement in the invisible realm. Shinn described this movement in various ways across her teachings, but the essential image is consistent. Something begins to form in response to a genuine request held in faith. A channel begins to take shape. A route that does not yet have a visible face begins to develop in the invisible field of supply. This is not imagination. This is the law of response that divine supply operates by. Ask, and the asking is received. The movement begins at the level of the invisible before any visible confirmation appears. Then the delay comes, and the delay is not evidence that supply has not moved. The delay is the period between the invisible formation of the channel and its appearance in visible experience. All supply passes through this delay. There is always a gap between the inner agreement and the outer confirmation. A seed does not become a harvest the moment it is planted. But the invisible process begins at planting. During the delay, the question is not whether supply is moving. The question is what the receiver is speaking while the delivery is in transit. During the delay, the fear sentence rises. It rises because the visible world offers no confirmation. It rises because the mind cannot calculate the route. It rises because the body has been waiting long enough to begin interpreting the delay as denial. And so the sentence comes. Nothing is coming. Or I knew this would fail. Or the channel is gone. Or I am not worthy of this. And the sentence is spoken with the conviction that comes from genuine anxiety and genuine need. And the field of invisible supply, which was actively forming a channel in response to the original request, now receives a new instruction from the same source. And the new instruction says, stop. The order has been cancelled. The receiver no longer agrees with supply. The spoken declaration of absence does something specific to the inner state. It does not merely reflect fear, it activates it. The sentence, nothing is coming, sets the body into a threat response. The nervous system hears the declaration and responds as if the threat it describes is certain and immediate. And in that threat state, something happens to perception. It narrows. The brain in a threatened state does not scan broadly for creative opportunity. It scans narrowly for danger. It looks for exits from the threat rather than openings for supply. And the channels that were forming in the invisible realm, channels that would have become visible through a widened field of perception, now become invisible to the receiver, who is scanning only for confirmation of the fear sentence that was just spoken. What the narrowed perception then produces is a specific and painful experience. Small signs of supply begin to appear, and the receiver cannot see them. A message arrives that would have led to an unexpected income if answered. The receiver does not answer it because the fear sentence has convinced them that what is arriving cannot be real provision. An idea surfaces that would have opened a new channel. The receiver dismisses it because the fear sentence has already declared that nothing is coming, and the idea does not match any visible route they had previously identified. An offer of help comes through an unexpected person. The receiver refuses or ignores it because the fear sentence has primed the inner agreement to expect disappointment rather than supply. Every small sign is interpreted through the lens of the declared absence. Every channel is filtered through the standing order of the fear sentence. Faith itself weakens in the presence of a repeated fear sentence, not because faith is fragile by nature, but because spoken words strengthen whatever inner agreement they reinforce. If you speak the fear sentence more often than you speak the faith declaration loses ground. It becomes a ceremonial moment in prayer rather than the dominant posture of the inner field. And a faith that is strong in prayer but weak in daily speech is not the kind of faith that Shinn described as the operative spiritual force behind receiving. Shinn's faith was a declared, maintained, protected inner agreement that held its position regardless of what the visible world was confirming. It was faith as a standing order, not faith as a morning ritual followed by a day of fear sentences. As faith weakens, the channel itself begins to lose its definition. The invisible formation that began in response to the original asking needs the receiver's continued agreement to complete its development. Supply moving through an invisible channel toward a visible receiver requires a certain level of consistent inner agreement at the receiving end. When that agreement is repeatedly interrupted by fear sentences, the channel does not disappear entirely, but it cannot complete its movement into visibility. It remains in the invisible realm, still technically active, still authorized by the source, but unable to bridge into the visible life of a receiver who has been consistently declaring its absence. The receiver then experiences something that compounds the confusion. What looks like rejected opportunities and missed channels. A door that was opening gets closed because the fear sentence made the receiver unable to move toward it. An offer that was coming stops coming because the receiver's energy of refusal was communicated through their spoken words and inner state. A channel that was forming around a specific relationship goes dormant because the fear sentence declared that the relationship was not trustworthy or relevant. And after enough of these experiences, the receiver concludes that supply has failed. They say, I tried to trust, and it did not work. I prayed and received nothing. The universe does not provide for me. But what actually happened is different. Supply moved, the channel formed, the delivery was initiated, and the fear sentence, repeated consistently, cancelled the agreement at the receiving end before the delivery could complete. The final moment of this cycle is the one that most breaks the heart of those who teach this law. The viewer, standing at the end of a long season of waiting, declares that supply failed. They close their faith. They withdraw their expectation. They reach a conclusion of abandonment, and they do not know because they cannot see the invisible mechanism that supply was never absent. The law was never broken. The source never withdrew the provision. What happened was that the fear sentence became a standing cancellation order that repeated itself more consistently than the faith declaration, and the delivery that had been authorized and initiated could not find a receiving field open enough to complete the final movement from invisible to visible. The supply was active. The fear agreed with absence, and absence is what the agreement delivered. Understanding this mechanism is not meant to produce shame or self-blame. It is meant to produce something far more valuable, a precise map of where the interruption must happen. The interruption does not happen in the bank account. It does not happen in the economy. It does not happen in any visible channel. It happens in the mouth. It happens in the spoken order that the receiver places into the field of their own receiving. And the spoken order can be changed. The fear sentence can be interrupted. The cancellation can be cancelled. And when it is, the invisible supply that has never actually left the field can complete its movement toward the person who has finally stopped declaring its absence. The invisible mechanism of supply is always operating. It does not take days off. It does not punish you for past fear sentences by withholding future provision. It simply responds to the current inner agreement of the receiver. Change the agreement. Speak supply. Hold the declaration. Protect the faith from cancellation. And the mechanism that has been waiting for a clear receiving signal will find a way to deliver what the source has already authorized. There are two kinds of spoken sentences operating in the field of your receiving at any given moment. One is the command of faith, the other is the fear sentence. They do not occupy the same space. They do not operate together. They are not complementary parts of a balanced perspective. They are opposing orders sent to the same receiving field, and the field responds to whichever order is spoken with the greater consistency and the greater conviction. This is not a law you can negotiate with. It is not a law that rewards balance or nuance. It is a law that rewards clarity. And the person who speaks the command of faith more consistently than the fear sentence is the person whose receiving field stays open enough for supply to complete its delivery. The spoken command that agrees with supply says, "Divine supply is active." These four words are not a chant or an affirmation in the popular sense of a repeated positive phrase. They are a spiritual declaration. They are an order placed with the inner field of receiving that says, "Supply is real, supply is present, supply is moving, and I agree with it." When this sentence is spoken sincerely, when it carries the weight of genuine inner agreement rather than mere mechanical repetition, it does something measurable in the receiving state. The body relaxes slightly. The perception widens. The inner field opens to the possibility of unexpected channels. The receiving posture shifts from braced for disappointment to expectant of supply. And in that shifted state, the channels that were previously invisible begin to become visible. The fear sentence says, "Nothing is coming," and when it is spoken sincerely, when it carries the weight of the genuine anxiety that provoked it, it does something equally measurable in the opposite direction. The body contracts, the perception narrows, the inner field closes around the declared absence. The receiving posture shifts from expectant to resigned. And in that resigned state, the channels that were forming become undetectable, the small signs are dismissed, the offers are refused, and the delivery cannot complete. Both sentences are spoken sincerely. Both carry genuine emotional weight, but they carry opposite creative authority. One opens the door, the other closes it, and you choose, in each moment of pressure, which sentence your mouth will speak. The command opens. This is not a poetic description. It is a practical spiritual reality. When the spoken command agrees with supply, the receiver enters a state in which receiving is physically, emotionally, and perceptually possible. They notice things they would have missed. They respond to people they would have ignored. They make decisions that agree with supply, rather than decisions that protect against disappointment. They walk through doors they would previously have dismissed as unworthy of their attention. The command sentence does not deliver supply directly by magic. It creates the inner condition in which the supply that the source is already directing can actually arrive at the receiving end. The fear sentence contracts. Every time the fear sentence is spoken and allowed to stand unchallenged, the receiving field tightens. And the tighter it becomes, the more the visible world appears to confirm the fear sentence's prediction. Not because the fear sentence is speaking truth, but because the contracted receiving state cannot recognize supply in the forms it takes. Supply arrives in unexpected forms. It arrives through people, ideas, opportunities, coincidences, open doors, and invitations that do not look like the supply the mind was waiting for. A contracted receiver, trained by the fear sentence to expect nothing, cannot recognize supply in an unfamiliar form. And the supply that was fully authorized and actively moving passes by a receiver who has declared its absence too many times to see its arrival. The command agrees with source. When you say divine supply is active, you are not agreeing with your bank account. You are agreeing with the law that governs supply at the level of its origin. The source does not run out of supply. The formless substance from which all visible provision takes shape is inexhaustible. When the spoken command aligns with this truth, when it speaks from the level of the source rather than the level of the visible appearance, it places a declaring agreement with the deepest level of reality available. It bypasses the visible report and speaks to the invisible law, and the invisible law responds to agreement. It honors what is declared. It supports what is expected. It completes what has been authorized by the consistent inner agreement of the receiver. The fear sentence agrees with appearance. When you say, "Nothing is coming," you are agreeing with the visible world's current display rather than the invisible law that governs supply. And the problem with agreeing with appearances is that appearances are always behind. The visible world shows you the result of yesterday's inner agreement, not the result of today's. If you agreed with fear yesterday, the visible world shows you fear's result today. If you begin agreeing with supply today, the visible world will show you supply's result in days, weeks, or however long the invisible process requires to complete. But if you look at today's appearance and speak another fear sentence, you are sending another cancellation order into the field of a delivery that your yesterday's fear is still delaying. You are compounding the cancellation. You are extending the delay with each repetition. The command prepares receiving. Each time the spoken command of faith is maintained, especially under pressure, especially in the presence of a visible world that offers no confirmation, the receiving field is prepared. It is stretched open. It is trained toward expectation rather than resignation, and a receiving field that has been consistently trained toward expectation begins to recognize supply in forms it previously missed. It begins to respond to the source's channels before they have fully formed, moving toward them intuitively, acting on them faithfully, completing the agreement at the receiving end so that the delivery can close successfully. The command is not passive. It is the most active spiritual thing the receiver can do in the period between asking and visible confirmation. The fear sentence prepares disappointment. This is perhaps the saddest law of the receiving field. You get what you consistently prepare for, not always exactly in the form you feared, but consistently in the emotional range you trained your inner agreement to expect. A person who has spoken enough fear sentences has prepared their entire receiving apparatus for disappointment. They expect less. They accept less. They release supply quickly when it arrives because some part of the inner agreement says it cannot be real or permanent. They refuse help because the fear sentence has prepared them to distrust unexpected channels. They miss opportunities because the prepared expectation of disappointment filters out anything that does not confirm the standing fear order. The preparation is thorough. The fear sentence has done its work well, and the preparation must be undone, sentence by sentence, declaration by declaration. The command must be repeated. Shinn was not teaching a one-time declaration. She was teaching a practice of consistent spoken agreement with divine supply. The command must be repeated with the same frequency or greater frequency than the fear sentence has been repeated. Because the fear sentence has years of repetition behind it, It has accumulated strength through thousands of daily speakings. The command of faith must be spoken enough times to begin building an inner agreement strong enough to become the dominant posture of the receiving field. One declaration does not undo years of cancellation, but one declaration is where the undoing begins, and the declaration repeated with genuine conviction, spoken into the pressure rather than after it has passed, spoken before the proof appears rather than in gratitude after it arrives, spoken as a command rather than a wish, begins to shift the field. One word at a time, one morning at a time, one moment of pressure at a time. The fear sentence must be cancelled, not suppressed, not ignored, not overcome through willpower, cancelled. There is a difference. Suppression means the fear sentence rises and is pushed down without being addressed, which means it continues to exert its influence beneath the surface of the spoken word. Cancellation means the fear sentence is recognized, refused, and actively replaced with the spoken command that agrees with supply. Cancel that order. Say it internally if necessary. This is not the sentence I authorize to govern my receiving. Divine supply is active, and then speak the command with as much sincerity as the fear sentence carried. This is the practice. This is the spiritual discipline at the center of Shinn's law of words. And this practice, applied consistently, in the pressure moments, in the delay moments, in the silence moments, in the moments when the visible world is offering nothing but a report of lack, this practice changes the field. The delivery can complete. The supply can arrive. The channel that the source has been preparing can finally find a receiver who has stopped sending the cancellation. If this teaching is helping you hear the sentence that has been cancelling your supply, if something in this message is naming what has been operating beneath the surface of your prayers, then this channel was built for you. Subscribe to the Master's Legacy, because this channel exists to preserve the teachings of the great masters of spiritual prosperity and to translate their laws into a direct, clear message for people facing real financial pressure today. Wallace Wattles, James Allen, Florence Scovel Shinn, and others like them left behind a body of spiritual wisdom that the modern world has mostly forgotten or distorted into shallow imitation. This channel is committed to protecting that wisdom and delivering it without compromise, without hype, and without the dilution that makes it ineffective. When you subscribe, you are not subscribing to a content channel. You are returning, repeatedly, to a source of teaching that goes deeper than surface motivation, deeper than positive thinking, deeper than generic affirmation. You are subscribing to a law. You are returning to the kind of teaching that can actually change the inner agreement that governs your receiving field, that can name what has been blocking supply, that can give you the precise spiritual tools to interrupt the cancellation and restore the agreement with divine provision. These teachings do not age. They do not become less true as the economy changes or the circumstances shift. They are laws, and laws are worth returning to. Subscribe and come back every time the fear sentence rises, and you need to be reminded of what Shinn and the Masters actually taught. The fear sentence rises most often in the presence of a question the mind cannot answer. That question is, how? How will the money come? How will the need be met? How will the channel open? How will supply reach me in time? And because the mind cannot calculate the how, cannot find a visible route, cannot map a path from the current visible condition to the desired visible outcome, it concludes that there is no way. That conclusion becomes the fear sentence, and the fear sentence becomes the spoken order. But here is what must be understood about the mind's inability to calculate the how. The source was never waiting for the mind to solve the route before authorizing supply. The source operates through channels the mind has not imagined, through people who are not yet in the picture, through coincidences that no plan could have arranged, through timing that defies visible logic. The mind's failure to map the route is not evidence that the route does not exist. It is evidence that the route belongs to the source, not to the mind. The mind says, there is no way because it cannot see the way. This is not insight. This is a limitation dressed as wisdom. The mind's visibility is finite. The source's operating field is not. When the mind declares that there is no way, it is speaking from within its own perceptual boundary and projecting that boundary onto the infinite operating capacity of divine supply. It is the equivalent of a person standing inside a room with no windows looking out and declaring that there is nothing outside the building. The declaration is not false based on what they can perceive, but it is catastrophically wrong based on what actually exists beyond the limits of their perception. Divine supply does not disappear because the mind lacks a map. This is the corrective law. The source is not waiting for the mind to identify the channel before supply can move. Supply was never contingent on the mind's ability to trace the route. The channel does not require your discovery to be real. The provision does not require your planning to be authorized. Divine supply moves through invisible channels, through surprising connections, through unexpected timing, through open doors you have never walked through before, and through people you have never met. Your role is not to calculate the route. Your role is to hold the inner agreement that supply is active and allow the source to determine the how. Do not let a limited mind write the sentence your future must obey. This is perhaps the most precise instruction in this entire section. The mind is limited. Its visibility is limited. Its ability to imagine unprecedented channels is limited. Its ability to trust what it cannot see is very limited. And when a limited mind writes a sentence, the sentence inherits those limitations. When that sentence is spoken as a declaration, the receiving field is governed by those limitations. The future that emerges from a limited mind sentence is a future as small as the mind that authored it. But divine supply operates at a scale beyond the mind's limitation. And when you allow the source to author the future by holding a faith declaration rather than a fear sentence, what arrives is a supply that the mind could not have planned, could not have predicted, and genuinely could not have arranged on its own. The mind's inability to see the way is the beginning of faith, not the evidence against it. Faith, as Shinn defined it, is not required when the visible route is clear. Faith is what operates when the mind says, "I cannot see how." And the response of faith is not, "Therefore it is not coming." The response of faith is, "Therefore, I trust the source who sees what I cannot." The fear sentence converts the mind's legitimate limitation into a definitive verdict. Faith converts it into an invitation, not an invitation to passivity, but an invitation to spoken agreement with the invisible law that governs supply beyond the mind's calculating capacity. Speak supply from that place. Say the source knows the way even when I do not. Say divine supply is active even when the mind cannot find the route. Let the faith declaration hold the field while the source arranges the delivery through channels the mind will not see coming until they arrive. The freedom on the other side of releasing the how is significant. When you stop demanding that the mind produce the route before you speak faith, when you stop allowing the mind's inability to see to become the justification for the fear sentence, something opens in the receiving field. The pressure of trying to figure it out relaxes. The contracted state of calculating and coming up empty begins to ease. And in that easing, something that the contracted mind could not access becomes available. Perception of the channels that are already forming. The open door that the fear sentence made invisible becomes visible again. The quiet guidance that the calculating mind drowned out begins to be audible again. The unexpected person, the surprising opportunity, the coincidence that should not have made sense, these things arrive into the awareness of a person who has stopped demanding that the mind calculate their delivery and has started trusting the source to complete it. Imagine that divine supply operates through the most perfectly designed delivery system in existence. This system does not run out of stock. It does not have budget limitations. It does not depend on a favorable economy, favorable timing, or favorable visible conditions. It depends entirely on one thing: a confirmed order from a receiver who expects the delivery to complete. When the order is placed and the expectation is maintained, the delivery is authorized, the route is selected by the system rather than by the receiver, and the package is dispatched through channels the receiver could not have anticipated or arranged. The system is always operating. The supply is always available. The only variable is whether the order stands confirmed or cancelled at the receiving end. Prayer places the order. This is not a casual metaphor. When you pray with sincere faith, when you hold a genuine request before the source and trust in the invisible law of provision, you have placed an order into this delivery system. The request is real. The placement is real. The system receives the instruction and begins the invisible process of forming the channel through which the delivery will travel. This is what begins when faith asks. Not a hope that something might happen, but an order placed with the creative law that governs supply. The order is received, the movement begins. The delivery is authorized at the level of the invisible before any visible sign appears. Faith confirms the order. After the prayer places the order, the inner agreement of faith acts as the confirmation that keeps the order active and valid. It is the equivalent of the confirmation email that tells the delivery system, yes, this order is real. The receiver is expecting it. Do not cancel the dispatch. Faith maintained between the placing of the order and the arrival of the delivery is not a passive emotional state. It is an active confirmation signal. It says, continuously, the order stands. The receiver expects the delivery. The receiving end is prepared. And this confirmation is what allows the invisible channel to continue developing toward the moment when the delivery can cross from the invisible into the visible life of the receiver. Gratitude holds the order. When the receiver, even before the delivery has arrived, holds a posture of gratitude toward the source, they are performing an additional confirmation function within the delivery system. They are saying, not only do I expect this, but I have already received it in the inner realm of agreement and I am grateful. And this gratitude, spoken or held as an inner state, does something remarkable to the receiving field. It tells the system that the receiver is already prepared to hold the delivery when it arrives, that they will not dismiss it or reject it or fail to recognize it when it comes in an unexpected form. Gratitude is the advanced acceptance of what has not yet become visible, but is already real in the invisible field of supply. The fear sentence cancels the order. This is the mechanical truth that Shinn's entire teaching about words was designed to expose. When the fear sentence rises during the delay between placing the order and receiving the delivery, and when it is spoken with conviction, with the weight of genuine anxiety, with the authority of a person who believes what they are saying, the delivery system receives a new instruction from the same source that placed the original order. And that new instruction says, cancel, nothing is coming, the order is a mistake, do not complete the delivery. And the system, which does not distinguish between a prayer and a fear sentence in terms of the creative authority it assigns to each, processes the cancellation order. The channel that was forming begins to dissolve. The route that was developing becomes undefined. The delivery that was authorized becomes unstable. The person who prays for supply in the morning and then speaks a fear sentence by afternoon has placed an order and sent a cancellation before midday. They have done this not once but on hundreds of mornings over months and years. And the delivery system, which was responding faithfully to each prayer by initiating the invisible channel, has been receiving a cancellation for every order that was placed. The system is not broken, the supply is not absent, the law is not failing. The receiver is cancelling their own delivery with a consistency that has prevented any channel from completing its full movement from invisible to visible. And because the receiver cannot see the invisible mechanism, because they can only see that the delivery never arrived, they conclude that the system failed. But the system received exactly what was sent. It received an order and a cancellation. And a cancelled order does not deliver. The receiver then enters a painful state of confusion. They know they prayed. They remember the faith they felt in the moment of asking. They believe, or at least they want to believe, that divine supply is real, but they see no evidence in their visible world that the order was processed. And in their confusion, they reach for the fear sentence again, this time not only as a response to a specific visible condition, but as a general verdict on the reliability of the delivery system itself. I prayed and nothing came. I trusted and was not supplied. The system does not work for me. And this verdict, spoken repeatedly, becomes the deepest and most comprehensive cancellation order they have ever placed, because it cancels not just one specific request, but the entire agreement with divine supply at the level of the system itself. The solution is not to pray harder. It is not to feel more faith in the moment of asking. It is not to use better words in the prayer. The solution is to stop sending the cancellation, to interrupt the fear sentence the moment it rises, before it speaks, before it completes its order in the field of receiving, to replace it with the spoken command that confirms the delivery. Divine supply is active. The order stands. The channel is forming. I expect delivery through channels I cannot yet see. These sentences, spoken consistently in the pressure of the delay, do not just replace the fear sentence emotionally. They withdraw the cancellation order from the field and restore the confirmation signal that allows the invisible channel to continue developing toward visible delivery. The prayer placed the order. The faith confirms it. The fear sentence would cancel it, and the command of faith spoken in the pressure prevents that cancellation. The order you placed in prayer is still in the system. If you have been praying for supply, if you have been asking with genuine faith even while the fear sentence also rose, the invisible movement that your prayer initiated has not been permanently erased. The source does not permanently delete authorized supply because the receiver has been struggling with fear sentences, but the delivery cannot complete while the cancellation order remains the dominant spoken instruction from your end. The correction is available right now. The cancellation can be cancelled. The confirmation can be restored. And when it is, when the fear sentence is consistently interrupted and replaced with the spoken command of faith, the channel that has been waiting for a clear receiving signal can complete its movement. The delivery the source authorized can arrive, not on the mind's timeline and not through the route the mind identified, but through the invisible pathway that divine supply has always been preparing, waiting only for the receiver to stop declaring its absence long enough for the delivery to be completed. The fear sentence does not always arrive as a generalized declaration of doom. It arrives in specific clothing, wearing the words that fit the specific pressure of the moment, and these specific sentences are the interference signals that block the completion of divine supply's delivery. They are precise cancellation orders tailored to the exact appearance that triggered them. Learning to recognize them is the spiritual work of interruption, and the first step of recognition is hearing them named clearly, so that the next time they rise they can be identified before they are spoken. I will never have enough. This is perhaps the most common fear sentence in the receiving field of financial anxiety. It is spoken when the bank account is low, when the expenses exceed the visible income, when the month looks longer than the money available to fill it. It sounds like a sober assessment. It feels like acknowledging reality without flinching. But inside the delivery system of divine supply, it is a standing cancellation order that says no amount of supply can satisfy this receiver because they have declared that enough is structurally impossible for them. It is not a description of a current condition. It is a declaration of permanent insufficiency, and the field of receiving honors the declaration. There is no way. This interference sentence rises when the mind cannot identify the route from present visible conditions to desired visible provision. It is the sentence of the person who has looked at every visible channel and found them all closed, who has calculated every available resource and found them all insufficient, who has waited for a familiar form of supply and found only silence. And because the mind genuinely cannot find a way, the sentence feels like clear thinking. It does not feel like a cancellation order, but it speaks directly into the field of invisible supply, which has been forming a way that no visible calculation would have predicted, and declares that field empty. There is no way. And the invisible formation, which needed the receiver's expectation to complete its bridging into visible experience, receives instead a cancellation. Nothing is coming. This interference sentence arrives during the delay, when the delivery is in transit through the invisible channel, but has not yet reached visible confirmation. It is the sentence of impatience, of a receiver who cannot tolerate the gap between asking and receiving without filling that gap with a verdict. Nothing is coming. But the declaration is not neutral. It is an order that the delivery system processes as a withdrawal of the confirmation signal, and a delivery moving through an invisible channel toward a receiver who has withdrawn the confirmation signal cannot complete its delivery at the receiving end. The channel goes dormant. The route dissolves. And the receiver's declaration proves itself, not because it was true, but because it was honored. I cannot afford anything. This interference sentence is particularly destructive because it contracts the receiver at the level of identity rather than merely at the level of current conditions. It does not say, "I do not currently have the funds for this specific thing." It says, "I am a person who cannot afford." This is an identity declaration, a statement of permanent financial identity, and it governs the entire receiving field from the inside. A person who has declared themselves as someone who cannot afford has made that identity the governing filter of their perception. They will not recognize the unexpected channel that arrives to fund the very thing they said they could not afford, because the identity filter says, "This cannot be for me, I am a person who cannot afford." The channel arrives and the identity filter sends it away unclaimed. Money never stays. This interference sentence is spoken by those who have received supply before and then watched it leave. And because supply has genuinely left before, the sentence feels like learned wisdom. It feels like a realistic assessment of a personal pattern. But it is a declaration that governs the future, not merely a description of the past. When the receiver says, "Money never stays," they are placing a standing order for impermanence around all future supply. And the field of receiving honors that standing order. Supply arrives, and the agreement that it will not stay becomes operative. The supply does not stay, not because the source intended it to be temporary, but because the receiver's standing order declared impermanence and the inner agreement made impermanence the experienced reality. This always happens to me. This interference sentence is the generalization of all previous fear sentences into a personal law. It says that the pattern of lack, delay, disappointment, and closed channels is not a temporary condition but a personal destiny. It gives the history of difficulty the authority of a permanent spiritual assignment. And it is one of the most comprehensive cancellation orders the receiver can place because it does not merely cancel one specific delivery. It cancels the entire category of supply for this person in all forms, through all channels, at all times. If this always happens to me, then supply can never break the pattern. If this is who I am in relation to money, then no channel can deliver differently than every previous channel delivered. The standing order is total, and it must be completely cancelled and replaced. I am not supported. This interference sentence attacks the receiver's relationship with source directly. It does not merely declare an absence of money, it declares an absence of divine care. It says the source does not see me, does not act on my behalf, does not move supply in my direction, does not consider my need worthy of response. And this declaration does not just close the financial receiving field, it closes the spiritual one. The person who has spoken, "I am not supported," long enough and sincerely enough has created an inner agreement that the source is indifferent to their condition. And it is very difficult for supply to arrive through a receiving field that has closed its connection to the source at the level of trust itself. The interference here is total. The cancellation reaches all the way to the root of the agreement with divine provision. It is too late. This interference sentence contains the greatest presumption of all the fear sentences, the presumption that time is the source's constraint, that if supply has not arrived by a certain point, the window has closed, the opportunity has expired, the delivery is no longer possible. But divine supply is not governed by the mind's calendar. It is not constrained by the timeline the mind constructed when it placed the original order. The source does not look at a clock and say, "The time you allowed has passed, so I have withdrawn the supply." The source operates through a timing that is not always visible or predictable, and what the mind interprets as too late is sometimes simply the moment before the unexpected delivery that no timeline would have anticipated. But the fear sentence, "It is too late," closes the receiving field at the very moment when the delivery might have been nearest to completion. There is a freedom available to you that the fear sentence has been denying. And it is the freedom of not having to track the delivery. When an order is placed with a system that is fully capable and fully committed to completing the delivery, the healthy posture of the receiver is expectation, not monitoring. You expect the delivery. You prepare to receive it. You keep the door of receiving open. But you do not obsessively check the tracking, demand to know the exact route, panic because the estimated time of arrival has passed without visible confirmation, or send a cancellation order every time the delivery is not yet in your hands. You simply hold the expectation and go about your life in the confidence that the delivery is coming. You do not have to repeat the sentence fear offers you. This is the first freedom the teaching restores. The fear sentence rises, and it offers itself to you as the obvious response to the visible world's current display. It says, "Speak me." And you have spoken it many times, because it felt like the natural, honest, responsible thing to do. But you are not obligated to obey it. You are not required to give it your voice. The fear sentence is an offer, not a mandate, and you can decline the offer. You can recognize the sentence as it rises, identify it as a cancellation order, and choose not to let it pass through your mouth. That choice, made in the moment of pressure, is among the most spiritually powerful acts the receiver can perform. You can cancel the fear instead of canceling the supply. This is the reversal that Shinn's law makes possible. Instead of letting the fear sentence cancel the supply, you can speak a cancellation over the fear sentence itself. You can say internally, "Cancel that order," and then replace it with the spoken command that agrees with supply. This is not pretending the fear does not exist. The fear is real. The anxiety is real. The visible pressure is real. But the spoken order you authorize into the field of your receiving is the one you choose to speak, not the one the fear automatically reaches for. Cancel the fear sentence. Speak the supply sentence. This is the act that changes the field. Your mouth can return to divine order before the visible world changes. This is the radical truth that Shinn's teaching carries. You do not have to wait for the bank account to shift before you speak supply. You do not have to wait for the channel to open visibly before you declare that divine supply is active. You do not have to wait for proof before you speak from faith. The mouth can return to divine order right now, in the midst of the visible lack, in the center of the delay, in the pressure of the silence. The mouth can say, "Divine supply is active, the way is opening, channels are forming," and these words can be spoken with sincerity and with conviction, not because the visible world confirms them, but because the invisible law authorizes them. And the spoken word, authorized by the law, begins to shift the receiving field before the visible confirmation appears. The freedom of releasing the tracking also means releasing the demand to know which channel will deliver. The fear sentence very often rises specifically around the channel question. You do not see how supply will come, through which person, through which opportunity, through which avenue. And because you cannot identify the channel, the fear sentence says the channel does not exist. But the freedom of not tracking the package means releasing the requirement that you know the route. You placed the order. The delivery was authorized. The system is capable. The channel will be whatever the source selects, not whatever the mind can pre-identify. Your role is to keep the receiving door open, speak the confirmation daily, and stop sending the cancellation every time you cannot see the package in transit. This freedom is not passivity. It is trust in motion. You still act. You still move. You still walk through the nearest open door and respond to the guidance that comes, but you do it from a posture of supply rather than from a posture of fear. You do it as a receiver who knows the delivery is coming, rather than as a person who is desperately trying to force a delivery that they have secretly already declared will not arrive. The action that comes from supply expectation is different from the action that comes from fear. It is calmer. It is more perceptive. It is more likely to recognize the unexpected channel when it appears. And it is much more likely to walk through the door that supply opens, rather than walking past it, because the fear sentence said it could not be the one. The freedom of not tracking the package restores something that chronic fear sentences have taken from you: the capacity to live between the asking and the receiving, without the daily anguish of unmet expectation. You asked, the order was placed, the delivery was authorized, the channel is forming. And you can today, right now, before any visible confirmation appears, release the compulsive tracking and simply hold the word of faith. Divine supply is active. The delivery is in process. The route is the sources to determine. My role is to keep the door open, speak the confirmation, and walk through the nearest opportunity that presents itself. This is what receiving from divine supply actually looks like in practice. Not magical effortlessness, not passive waiting for money to fall from the sky, but the disciplined freedom of a receiver who has stopped cancelling their own delivery and has begun, sentence by sentence, to restore the agreement that allows the completion of the supply the source has already authorized. The first step of the practical protocol is to name what you actually want, not in vague terms that could mean anything and therefore direct nothing, but with the precision of a specific declaration that places a clear order into the field of receiving. Shinn was very specific about this. The clarity of the spoken order matters. A clear order can be processed. A vague request creates a vague channel, and a fear sentence spoken over a vague request does even more damage because the receiver has no precise faith declaration to return to when the fear sentence rises. The first act of this protocol is to define the what. What specific provision do you need? What specific supply are you asking for? Name it. Hold it. Let the inner image be specific enough to constitute a clear order. The first question you must ask yourself honestly is, what fear sentence do I repeat most? Not in general, not theoretically. Which specific sentence with its specific words rises most automatically when financial pressure appears? Is it, I will never have enough? Is it, nothing is coming? Is it, I cannot afford this? Is it, the money always runs out? Is it, I am not the kind of person who gets help? The specificity matters because you cannot interrupt a sentence you have not identified, and you cannot replace a sentence you have not named. Take a moment even now to hear the sentence. It has a familiar sound. It has appeared in the same situations. It has followed you through different seasons in different forms, but with the same core structure. Name the sentence. This naming is the beginning of authority over it. The second question is, when do I say it? Under what specific circumstances does the fear sentence appear? Is it when the bank account drops below a certain level? Is it when a bill arrives unexpectedly? Is it when a silence follows a prayer that expected an immediate answer? Is it when another person's supply is visible and yours is not? Is it in the morning when you survey the day's visible conditions? Is it at night when the calculations come? The moment of appearance matters, because the moment of appearance is also the moment where the interruption must be inserted. If you know that the fear sentence rises specifically at the end of the month when bills are due, you can prepare the replacement sentence in advance. You can arrive at that moment with the spoken command already in your mouth, rather than reaching for the fear sentence by default. The third question is, what appearance triggers it? Beyond the timing, what specific visible condition acts as the trigger? Is it a number on a screen? Is it the silence from a person who owes you something? Is it a closed door? Is it the presence of a need that has no visible solution? The trigger is where the visible world makes its most powerful case for the fear sentence, and knowing the trigger allows you to do something remarkable. You can prepare a response to the trigger before the trigger appears. You can decide in advance that when this specific appearance presents itself, the sentence that will leave your mouth is the sentence of divine supply, not the sentence of declared absence. The preparation is not denial of the trigger. It is the refusal to let the trigger write the order. The fourth question is the one that requires the most spiritual honesty. What does the fear sentence order? If your most repeated fear sentence is, I will never have enough, what has that order produced in your receiving field over the weeks and months you have been speaking it? If your most repeated fear sentence is, nothing is coming, what has that standing order done to the channels that were forming in response to your prayers? The question is not meant to produce shame. It is meant to produce recognition. The fear sentence is not neutral. It has been ordering something. It has been governing something. And seeing what it has been producing is the evidence that justifies, with full spiritual seriousness, the decision to interrupt it permanently. The fifth question completes the foundation of this protocol. What divine sentence replaces it? For every fear sentence you carry, there is a corresponding faith declaration that cancels its agreement and restores the field of receiving. The replacement is not randomly chosen. It must directly address the specific agreement that the fear sentence has been placing. If the fear sentence says, I will never have enough, the replacement must speak to the reality of supply's inexhaustibility. Divine supply is active, and there is always enough in the source. If the fear sentence says nothing is coming, The replacement speaks to the reality of the invisible channel. The way is opening through channels I cannot yet see. If the fear sentence says, I am not supported, the replacement speaks to the source's nature. Right channels of help are forming now, and I receive support from unexpected places. The replacement sentences Shinn's teaching offers are not merely comforting phrases. They are specific spoken orders that address the specific cancellation the fear sentence was placing. Divine supply is active. This speaks directly against the fear sentence's declaration of absence. The way is opening. This speaks directly against the fear sentence's declaration of impossibility. Right channels are forming. This speaks directly against the fear sentence's declaration that no route exists. I am guided, supplied, and ready to receive. This speaks directly against the fear sentence's declaration of unworthiness and isolation. The source knows the way. This speaks directly against the fear sentence's declaration that the mind's inability to calculate a route means no route exists. Each of these replacements must be spoken with the same conviction, the same emotional authority that the fear sentence carried. Not louder, not more desperately, but with equal or greater sincerity. The replacement is not a performance. It is not a spiritual pretense. It is a declaration of a law that operates independently of visible confirmation. When you say, divine supply is active, you are not telling yourself that the bank account is full when it is not. You are speaking the truth of the invisible realm into the agreement of your receiving field. You are saying, the source has not run out. The delivery is authorized. The channel is forming. My agreement with supply stands. And you are saying this before the proof appears, because saying it before the proof appears is precisely what constitutes the spoken word of faith. It is the order placed ahead of the delivery. It is the confirmation maintained during the transit. It is the word that keeps the receiving door open, while the invisible channel completes its journey to the visible life of the receiver. Choosing the replacement sentence is a sacred act. Do not choose it casually. Do not choose a sentence that sounds good, but that you cannot speak with any sincerity. Choose the sentence that addresses your specific fear directly. Choose the sentence that, when you speak it, something in you responds, even if only slightly, even if only with a flicker of genuine recognition. That flicker is the receiving field responding to an order that agrees with supply. That flicker is the beginning of the shift. It may be small at first. It may feel uncertain in the face of the visible pressure. But it is real. It is the opening the faith sentence creates. And that opening, held and widened by repeated declaration, is where divine supply finds its channel into the visible life of the receiver who has finally stopped sending the cancellation. The definition of the what, then, has two components. It defines the specific supply being requested, the provision the prayer is asking for, with enough clarity to constitute a clean spoken order. And it defines the specific faith declaration that will replace the specific fear sentence that has been cancelling that very supply. Both components matter equally. The clarity of the request keeps the channel specific. The clarity of the replacement keeps the receiving field open during the transit. Together, they constitute a complete spiritual protocol. Ask with clarity, speak with faith, interrupt with authority, and replace with precision. This is what the Master taught. This is what the speaking of divine supply actually looks like in the lived experience of a person who has decided to stop cancelling their own delivery. The fear sentence very often disguises itself as a practical question. When the mind asks, "How will this come?" it is genuinely asking a question. But if that question is not immediately met with a faith declaration, it quickly converts into a fear sentence. The question, "How?" becomes the sentence, "There is no way." And that conversion happens so fast, so automatically, that the receiver often does not notice the transition from honest inquiry to declared impossibility. The practical protocol for releasing the how begins with learning to catch the moment of conversion and insert a different response before the fear sentence can complete. When the mind says, "How?" do not answer it with fear. This is the discipline that Shinn's entire method of spoken faith was designed to support. The mind will ask how. It will always ask how, especially in seasons of delay and silence and visible lack. The question itself is not the problem. The problem is what gets spoken in response to the question. If the fear sentence answers, the receiving field contracts around a declared impossibility. If the faith declaration answers, the receiving field holds open in expectation of an unexpected route. The question how is the fork in the spoken road, and the choice made at that fork shapes everything that follows in the field of receiving. When the mind says, "How will money come?" say, "The way is opening." This sentence does not answer the how with a specific plan. It does not pretend the mind has calculated the route. It says something far more spiritually precise. A way is forming that I have not yet seen, and my agreement with its formation is the declaration that the way is opening. This is the spoken agreement that the invisible channel requires at the receiving end to complete its development. The way needs the receiver's expectation to solidify into visible experience. And the declaration, "The way is opening," is the expectation spoken, the confirmation signal maintained, the cancellation order refused. When the mind says, "No one will help me," say, "Right channels of help are forming." This replacement is particularly important because the fear sentence around human assistance is one of the most socially embedded fear sentences the receiver can carry. The belief that no one will help, that one is alone in the financial need, that help from other people is unavailable or untrustworthy, closes the supply channels that run through human beings, and most visible channels of supply run through human beings in some form. The replacement sentence speaks directly into this closed field and declares that channels of human help, operating as instruments of divine supply, are actively forming in the invisible realm and will become visible through people and connections the receiver has not yet identified. When the mind says nothing is coming, say divine supply is active now. The word now is important in this declaration. It places the activity of supply in the present tense, not in a distant future the mind cannot access, not in a past the body cannot return to, but in the current moment of the fear sentences rising. Right now, divine supply is active. Right now, the channel is forming. Right now, the order stands confirmed. Right now, the source is operating in the invisible realm in ways I cannot yet observe, but am prepared to receive. The now is the refusal to let the delay sentence the future. It is the spoken command that keeps the present moment aligned with supply rather than with the fear's projection of continued absence. When the mind says, "I have tried everything and nothing works," the fear sentence is reaching for a comprehensive cancellation, and the replacement must be equally comprehensive. Everything that appears closed is not the source's final word on what is possible for me. There are channels I have not found and doors I have not tested. The source sees a route that I have not mapped, and I am open to receiving supply through a channel I have never used before. This replacement does not deny the history of difficulty. It refuses to allow that history to write the sentence for the future. It separates the past record from the future possibility. It insists that the source's supply is not limited by the receiver's previous experience of closed channels, because the channels have always been the source's to design, and the source is designing new ones. When the mind says, "I am not the kind of person this happens for," the fear sentence is operating at the level of identity, and the replacement must also address identity directly. I am a receiver of divine supply. I am aligned with the law that governs all provision. I do not need to have been a certain kind of person in the past to receive supply now. The source does not assign supply based on past identity. The source assigns supply based on current agreement, and my current agreement is that divine supply is active and that I am a person who receives it. This replacement is a declaration of new spiritual identity spoken into the field of receiving, before the visible evidence confirms it, because the identity must change in the spoken word before it can change in the visible life. The releasing of the how extends to releasing the specific channel through which the supply must come. The fear sentence around channel attachment says, supply must come through this specific person, this specific job, this specific contract, this specific avenue. And when that specific channel is closed, delayed, or silent, the fear sentence declares that supply is absent. But divine supply does not require the specific channel the mind identified. The source selects the channel. The receiver's role is to remain open to channels that do not fit the expected pattern, to channels that arrive through unexpected people, unexpected timing, unexpected forms of provision that the mind would not have listed as possibilities. Releasing the how means releasing the specific channel, trusting the source to select the route, and maintaining the declaration that the way is opening even when the anticipated path is clearly closed. The practical action of releasing the how in the daily experience looks very concrete. It looks like receiving a message from an unexpected person and responding to it rather than dismissing it. It looks like an idea arising that does not fit the plan and following it rather than rejecting it because it was unplanned. It looks like a door opening in a direction you were not facing and turning to walk through it rather than standing frozen, waiting for the familiar door to open. It looks like accepting help from a source you did not expect because you have released the requirement that help come through the channel you pre-selected. Each of these actions is the practical expression of the faith declaration. The mouth speaks, the way is opening, and then the feet turn to walk through the nearest open way. The command and the action agree with each other. The inner and the outer align, and the receiving field, finally consistent in its agreement with supply, can complete the delivery. Releasing the how also means releasing the timeline. The fear sentence loves to say it is too late, or this should have come by now. But divine supply does not operate on the timetable the mind constructed when it placed the original order. The source's timing is not arbitrary. It is precise in a way the mind cannot fully perceive. What feels like too late from the mind's perspective is sometimes exactly the moment of perfect timing from the source's perspective. The channel needed to form in the invisible before it could manifest in the visible, and that formation takes whatever time the invisible process requires. Trust the timing. Speak. The delivery is coming in perfect timing. Release the specific date the mind assigned. And in releasing it, release the fear sentence that turns every moment of delay into a verdict of failure. When the fear sentence is consistently replaced with the spoken command of faith, something begins to happen in the receiving field that cannot be forced and cannot be predicted. Surprise. The channels that form in response to divine supply are not the channels the mind would have predicted. They are the channels the source selects, and the source's selection criteria are not the mind's criteria. Supply arrives through unexpected people. It arrives through ideas that seem unrelated to the financial need. It arrives through timing that defies the sequence the mind had planned. It arrives through coincidences too precise to be random and too unexpected to have been arranged by the receiver. And the receiver, who has released the fear sentence and spoken the faith declaration, begins to notice these surprises, because the open receiving field can perceive what the contracted receiving field could not. The first sign of the opened receiving field is usually small. It is not immediately the full provision the prayer requested. It is a smaller opening, a signal, a channel beginning to form at the edge of perception. A viewer who has spent days speaking divine supply is active, begins to notice a message they would normally have ignored. They answer it. The exchange that follows leads to an unexpected offer. The offer does not immediately solve the full financial need, but it is undeniably a channel that was not there before the speaking began. And this small opening is the first visible confirmation that the invisible mechanism has been reactivated, that the fear sentence's cancellation has been withdrawn, that the receiving field has reopened enough for the beginning of supply to begin finding its way through. The opened field allows the receiver to stop panicking long enough to hear something. Panic and fear sentences are loud. They fill the inner space. They crowd out the quiet guidance that the source provides through intuition, through people, through circumstances, through a book that falls open to the right page, through a thought that surfaces at an unexpected moment. When the fear sentence is replaced and the panic begins to ease even slightly, even for a single hour, the receiver begins to hear things they could not hear in the contracted state. A thought arises that is not a fear thought. An idea appears that opens in a direction they had not considered. A feeling of guidance arrives around a specific action they had been resisting. These are not coincidences. They are the channels the source was trying to deliver through a receiving field that the fear sentence had been keeping too contracted to perceive. The opened field also changes the receiver's relationship with help. A person who has been speaking, "I am not supported," has been refusing help without realizing it. Not always explicitly. Often the refusal is subtle, dismissing a generous offer as insufficient, failing to follow up on a connection that offered itself, saying no to a request for their own skills or services because the fear sentence said the opportunity was not significant enough or was too risky or would not come through. But when the replacement sentence has been spoken long enough to shift the inner agreement, something changes in how the receiver relates to help. They begin to accept it. They begin to see it as the supply they asked for arriving in an unexpected form. They begin to recognize that divine supply, by definition, arrives through channels, and most channels are people, and accepting help from people is not weakness, it is receiving. The opened field makes room for a clear-spoken request to be made without shame. One of the quiet costs of chronic fear sentences around worthiness, around unworthiness to receive, around the belief that supply never comes for a person like you, is that the receiver stops making clear requests. They stop asking for what they need. They stop expressing their need to people who might be the channel through which supply was going to arrive. They swallow the request because the fear sentence says the answer will be no, or the asking will be embarrassing, or the supply cannot come from this direction anyway. But the replacement sentence creates a field in which the clear request can be made, because it has restored the inner agreement that supply is available, and that asking is the right behavior of a receiver. The opened field also changes how the receiver speaks about opportunities before they have been tested. The fear sentence speaks defeat over a door before it has been tried. It says, "This will not work," before any action has been taken, before any result is known. But the receiver who has consistently spoken divine supply is active, begins to approach opportunities differently. They do not say this will work as a guarantee, but they also do not say this will fail as a verdict. They say, "I am open to this channel. I will move toward this opening. I will trust the source to work through this direction, if this direction is the one." This is not naive. It is the posture of a receiver who has decided to let the source determine which channels are real rather than pre-closing them with a fear sentence before they have been given the opportunity to deliver. The opened field also allows the receiver to offer value without the paralysis of the fear sentence. Very often, the channels through which divine supply flows are ones in which the receiver offers something first: a skill, a service, a kindness, an idea, a contribution. And the fear sentence says, "Do not offer. What you have is not enough. You are not in a position to give. You have nothing worth offering." But the faith declaration restores the awareness that every receiver is also a contributor, that the channels of supply flow in both directions, and that offering from the inner posture of supply rather than scarcity creates the relational and practical conditions through which divine supply can move through another person toward you. The replacement sentence opens the field of giving as well as the field of receiving. And a field that can both give and receive is a field that supply can flow through in all directions. The receiver who has been speaking the replacement sentence long enough begins to see the shape of channels forming in the invisible realm, not with physical eyes, but with the perceptual widening that comes from an open receiving field. They begin to feel where supply is moving before it has fully arrived. They begin to sense which doors to test and which directions to turn. They begin to receive guidance, not through a loud dramatic voice, but through the quiet inner knowing that comes to a person whose receiving field is no longer contracted around a fear sentence, but is open, expansive, and expectant of the surprise that divine supply is always preparing for those who have stopped declaring its absence. The spoken declaration of supply must be followed by action. This is the teaching that keeps this protocol from becoming passive, and that keeps the channel of divine supply in agreement with the certain way that Wattles and Shinn and all the masters described. You speak supply, and then you move. You speak guidance, and then you listen for the direction and follow it. You speak channels, and then you look at the people around you with the eyes of a receiver who expects supply to come through human instruments. You speak receiving, and then you practice the act of accepting what arrives rather than dismissing it. The word must precede the action, but the action must follow the word. Together, They constitute the complete agreement that divine supply honors with delivery. Speak supply and then answer the door. This is the most concrete instruction of this entire protocol. When the spoken command of faith has been placed, the next act is to respond to whatever presents itself. Answer the message. Make the call, attend the meeting, follow the lead. The door is the action that the open receiving field presents to the receiver who has been speaking supply with sincerity. The door does not always look like the main entrance. Sometimes it looks like a side door, a small opening, a barely visible crack in a wall that the fear sentence said was solid. But the receiver who has been speaking, the way is opening, is the one who notices the crack, tests it, and finds it to be a passageway. Answer the door that presents itself. It may be the channel. Speak guidance and then listen. This instruction requires the receiver to understand that divine guidance does not always arrive as a dramatic vision or a clear external voice. It arrives through the quiet inner prompting that only a person with a widened receiving field can hear. And hearing it requires the same practice as speaking supply: consistency, faith, and the refusal to let the fear sentence drown out the guidance signal. When the fear sentence is present and dominant, the guidance cannot be heard above it. When the faith declaration is the dominant spoken order, the inner field quiets enough to perceive the direction that the source is providing. Speak guidance, then listen, then move in the direction you hear. Speak channels, and then notice people. Divine supply flows through channels, and most channels are people. The person who sits next to you, the person who messages you unexpectedly, the person who seems unrelated to your financial need, but who carries a connection, a resource, a referral, or an idea that bridges toward your supply. The fear sentence says, "No one can help me." The faith declaration says, "Right channels of help are forming through people I have not yet spoken to." And the action that follows is to notice the people in the field of your current life, to engage rather than withdraw, to open the conversation rather than close it, to be present to the human environment rather than retreating into the isolation that the fear sentence often creates. Speak receiving and then accept. The practical action of acceptance is one of the most important actions in this entire protocol, and it is one of the most frequently missed. Supply arrives in a form the receiver was not expecting, and the fear sentence says, "This is not enough," or "This cannot really be the provision," or "There must be a catch." And the receiver either dismisses the supply outright or accepts it so guardedly that the channel through which it was coming senses the refusal and closes. The faith declaration of receiving must be followed by the physical act of accepting supply when it arrives. Say thank you. Agree to the help. Take the opportunity. Receive the kindness. Receive the referral. Receive the unexpected income. Let it be what it is, the beginning of a delivery that the source authorized through a channel you did not predict. Speak faith and then move. The fear sentence freezes. It paralyzes the receiver in the gap between what they need and what they currently have. It says, "Do not move until you know the outcome. Do not act until you have certainty. Do not step forward until you can see where the floor is." But Shinn's law of spoken faith and subsequent action says the opposite. Speak the faith first and then move in the direction the open door presents, before certainty arrives, before the full provision is visible, before the outcome is guaranteed. The movement in the direction of the open door taken in faith is the action that completes the agreement between the spoken word and the visible world. It is the step that tells the delivery system the receiver is ready. Bring the supply through this channel. The movement of faith closes the loop between the spoken order and the delivered provision. Speak divine order and then stop panic action. This is the reverse of the previous instruction, and it is equally important. Not all action is faithful action. Some action is fear action, frantic, desperate, scattered movement in every direction simultaneously, driven not by guidance, but by the terror of inaction in the presence of visible lack. Speak divine order, and let the speaking calm the panic enough to distinguish between faithful action, the step that the open door is presenting, and panic action, the desperate grasping for any channel, any route, any movement that might produce supply, regardless of guidance. Divine order brings the right action in the right moment. panic produces the wrong action in every moment. The spoken order of divine order is itself an act of alignment with the guidance that produces faithful action. Speak trust, and then do the next right thing. The next right thing is simply the most immediately available faithful action in the direction of supply. It may be small. It may feel insufficient to the scale of the financial need. It may not feel like it could possibly bridge the gap between the visible condition and the desired provision. But the next right thing, done from a posture of supply rather than fear, from a position of spoken faith rather than declared absence, is the action that the source can work through, can multiply, can connect to unexpected channels, and can use as the beginning of the movement that brings the full supply to the receiver who has been speaking. Divine supply is active, with a consistency that has kept the receiving field open long enough for the delivery to complete. There is a reason the fear sentence has survived for so long inside the receiving field of a person who genuinely wants divine supply. The reason is not stupidity. It is not weakness. It is not lack of faith. The reason is that the fear sentence offers something that feels like safety. It offers the protection of lowered expectation. If the receiver predicts failure before failure arrives, then when failure appears, they were not surprised. They were prepared, and the pain of disappointment is slightly more tolerable when it was anticipated. This is the safety trap, the false comfort of agreeing with absence in order to avoid the agony of hoped-for supply that never materialized. The receiver who speaks, "I knew this would not work," is not expressing genuine insight. They are protecting themselves from the vulnerability of having hoped, because hoping means risking. If you hope sincerely, if you believe genuinely, if you expect with true faith, and then supply does not arrive on the schedule you expected, the pain is profound. And the person who has been hurt by that pain before builds a defense. The defense is the fear sentence. Speak, lack first. Expect nothing. That way, the disappointment has already been processed before it arrives. And the supply, if it comes, will feel like a bonus rather than a right. This strategy feels intelligent. It feels emotionally sophisticated, but it is the most expensive form of emotional protection available, because the price is the cancellation of the supply the protection was designed to insulate against. If the receiver speaks lack consistently, they feel honest. There is a virtue the fear sentence claims, the virtue of realism. The person who says, "I will never have enough," feels like they are not pretending, not performing spiritual optimism, not lying to themselves about the visible conditions they can clearly see. They feel grounded. They feel like an honest person looking at an honest reality. But this honesty is selective. It is honest about the visible appearance and dishonest about the invisible law. It reports the snapshot accurately and ignores the supply that is forming in the invisible realm. And selective honesty, when it consistently speaks only one layer of reality while ignoring the deeper one, is not wisdom. It is agreement with whatever partial truth is most immediately painful. The expectation of nothing feels safe because it makes disappointment controllable. If you never expected much, you cannot be devastated when much does not arrive. This is the logic of the fear sentence as emotional management. And it is a logic that many people who have been through genuine financial hardship carry with genuine justification. They have hoped before, they have trusted before, they have spoken faith before, and they have been disappointed. And the natural human response to repeated disappointment is to protect the heart by reducing its expectation. But the protection that reduces expectation also reduces receiving. You cannot fully receive what you do not expect to arrive, and you cannot expect what you have trained yourself to believe is structurally unavailable for a person like you. This protection is not safety. Shinn called it by its true name, agreement with lack. The false safety of lowered expectation is not neutral. It is an active agreement with the absence of supply. It is a standing order placed in the receiving field that says, supply is not expected here, and therefore the receiving field should be configured for disappointment rather than provision. And the receiving field, which responds to agreements rather than to intentions, configures itself accordingly. The person who sought safety through the fear sentence finds themselves living in a field of receiving. that has been calibrated to confirm their protection strategy, to deliver the disappointment they prepared for, and to make the supply they asked for seem increasingly remote. The false safety trap also trains the future to match the prediction. Every time the fear sentence is spoken and goes unchallenged, it adds another line of evidence to the inner file the mind keeps on the question of supply. That file grows thicker, the evidence accumulates, and as the evidence accumulates, the prediction becomes more and more solidly held as fact. The mind does not merely predict failure, it now has a documented history of failure to support the prediction. And the documented history makes the fear sentence feel not merely protective but prophetic. This is the insidious depth of the trap. The very protection strategy that was designed to prevent pain has been producing the condition that makes pain inevitable. The trap is hidden inside a strategy that feels intelligent, and breaking it requires recognizing that the strategy itself is the sabotage. The fear sentence weakens faith at the very moment faith is most needed. The false safety of predicted failure requires the abandonment of faith. You cannot simultaneously hold genuine expectation of divine supply and speak a sentence that declares supply's absence. One posture must yield to the other, and in the false safety trap, faith yields to the protection strategy. It is lowered, it is qualified, it is made conditional on visible confirmation that will not arrive until the faith has been maintained. And so the cycle continues. Faith too weak to produce the confirmation, confirmation absent because faith is too weak, faith weakened further by the absent confirmation, and the fear sentence speaking into every gap as the most reliable voice in the field of receiving. The most tragic cost of the false safety trap is the cancellation of receiving at the very moment when supply was nearest. The fear sentence, designed to protect against disappointment, arrives most powerfully at precisely the moment when supply is about to cross from invisible to visible. The delay reaches its natural end. The channel nears completion. The delivery approaches the receiving end, and the fear sentence on schedule says, "I knew nothing would come," and the cancellation is placed in the receiving field at the moment of nearest delivery. The supply that was arriving cannot complete its crossing into the visible life of a receiver, who at the crucial final moment sent the cancellation order that has been their habitual response to every season of delay. The false safety trap costs the receiver the supply they most needed at the moment they most needed it. Divine supply does not only fail to arrive because the channel is blocked, it also fails to complete because the receiver rejects the delivery when it appears. The fear sentence is not only operative in the gap between asking and receiving, it is also operative at the moment of receiving itself, and this is perhaps the most heartbreaking form of the cancellation. The supply arrives in visible form, and the fear sentence speaks over it in the moment of its arrival, dismissing it, doubting it, refusing it, or poisoning it with the prediction that it will not last. The delivery is rejected. The supply that found its way through an unexpected channel is sent back unopened by a receiver who could not recognize it because the fear sentence had taught them to expect nothing good. A small opportunity appears. The invisible channel has completed enough of its journey to present itself as a visible opening. It is not the massive provision the receiver was imagining. It is smaller, more modest, more indirect than the expected delivery. And the fear sentence says, "This is nothing. It is too small. It is not the answer. This will not be enough to make a real difference," and the small opening is dismissed. But what the fear sentence does not know, because it cannot perceive the invisible realm, is that small openings are often the beginning of large deliveries. They are the first visible foothold of a supply chain that would have grown had it been received with faith rather than dismissed with fear. The nothing that the fear sentence declared was actually the beginning, and the beginning was rejected. A person offers help. They arrive through an unexpected connection in an unexpected form with an unexpected kind of assistance. The invisible channel of human supply has found its first visible expression, and the fear sentence says there is a catch, or this person cannot really help me, or this is charity and I should not need charity, and the offer is refused or accepted so minimally and so grudgingly that the channel cannot expand through it. The person who offered help senses the rejection and withdraws. The channel that was opening through them closes, and the receiver tells themselves they were wise to be cautious, never recognizing that they just rejected the delivery they had been praying for because the fear sentence told them it could not be real. A delay ends. The long silence that provoked multiple fear sentences finally breaks. The channel delivers its first visible sign, but the fear sentence, conditioned by the length of the delay to expect continued absence, says, "This is temporary. It will not last. Something will go wrong. I have seen this before. Supply comes and then disappears." And the receiver holds the visible provision at arm's length, braced for its disappearance, rather than prepared to receive it fully, build from it, and allow it to become the foundation for the next movement of supply. The delivery is accepted physically, but rejected spiritually. And a supply that is held at arm's length cannot multiply the way a supply that is fully received and gratefully held can multiply. A door opens. Not the door the receiver was watching, not the door that the mind had identified as the correct channel. A different door, unexpected, unfamiliar, leading in an unexpected direction. And the fear sentence says, "I am not ready for this. I am not qualified for this. This is not the right door. This came at the wrong time. This is not the answer I was expecting." And the door closes, either because the receiver refuses to walk through it, or because the hesitation communicates a refusal to the person or situation that opened it. The source opened a door. The fear sentence convinced the receiver not to walk through it, and supply that was fully authorized and actively delivering was turned away at the threshold by a receiver who was waiting for a different-looking door. Money arrives. Provision comes through an unexpected channel in an unexpected amount. Not everything the prayer requested, but a real movement of supply, and the fear sentence immediately speaks over it. It will disappear. It will not be enough. I will run through it too fast. This will be taken away. The supply is not appreciated as the channel it is. It is immediately shadowed by the fear of its future absence, and in that shadow, the receiver makes decisions about the supply from a fear posture rather than a faith posture, spending it from panic, holding it from anxiety, failing to multiply it through the kind of faithful, guided action that supply received in faith produces. The supply arrives. The fear sentence makes its management a form of continued cancellation. And the next delivery is affected by the way the previous one was received. Guidance comes. The source speaks through intuition, through a clear inner direction, through an idea that arrives with unusual clarity and a feeling of quiet rightness. And the fear sentence says, "That cannot work, that is too simple, that is not how these things are done. That approach has failed before. That idea is not serious enough to be the answer to a serious financial need," and the guidance is dismissed. The direction is refused. The intuitive knowing is explained away, and the receiver continues waiting for the dramatic external provision, the obvious visible channel, the clear logical solution, while the quiet guidance that would have led them to the channel they were looking for is filed away as irrelevant imagination. Supply moves, not in one specific direction, but across multiple potential channels simultaneously. This is how the invisible field of divine supply operates. It does not commit exclusively to one route. It develops multiple channels, any one of which might become the primary delivery depending on which one the receiver engages with faithfully. But when the fear sentence is operating, the receiver narrows their perception so drastically that they can only see one channel at a time, and when that channel disappoints, they declare that all supply has failed. The multiple channels that were still forming in the invisible realm do not receive the receiver's attention, faith, or action. And supply, which was moving through multiple avenues simultaneously, finds no channel that the receiver has left open enough to complete the delivery. The rejected deliveries accumulate, and their accumulation becomes the evidence the fear sentence uses to justify itself. I was right. Nothing comes. I tried to receive, and nothing held. The people who offered help let me down. The opportunities did not materialize. The guidance did not lead anywhere. And each of these statements may be partially accurate as a description of the visible experience. But the fear sentence does not acknowledge its own role in each rejection. It does not see that the small opportunity was the beginning of a larger supply. It does not see that the person's offer of help was a channel that the fear sentence's suspicion closed. It does not see that the guidance was real, and the dismissal was the error. It takes the rejected deliveries as proof of its own predictions, and it uses that proof to justify sending more cancellation orders, deepening the cycle of rejection that it created. The structure of the fear sentence that cancels divine supply can now be named precisely because you have arrived at the moment in this teaching where recognition becomes possible. The structure follows a consistent logic, and once you see the logic, you will recognize every variation of the fear sentence, no matter what specific words it uses. The structure says, "Because I cannot perceive a certain thing in the visible realm, that thing does not exist in the invisible realm. Because I cannot see the way, there is no way. Because the provision is not yet visible, it is not coming. Because I have failed before, I will fail again. Because the channel is delayed, supply is absent. Because I feel afraid, the situation is truly dangerous. Because I cannot control the outcome cannot be favorable." Every fear sentence is built on this structure. It takes a real, visible, observable condition, something genuinely present in the physical experience, and uses it to declare a verdict over the invisible realm that the physical condition cannot actually speak to. These 6 variations are among the most commonly spoken. Because I cannot see the way, there is no way. Because I do not have it now, it is not coming. Because I have failed before, I will fail again. Because the channel is delayed, supply is absent. Because I feel afraid, I am unsafe. Because I cannot control it, it cannot happen. And beneath all of them is the same error. The visible world is being given authority over the invisible law. The observable condition is being granted the power to define the limits of divine supply. And the spoken version of this error, placed into the receiving field with the conviction of genuine belief, functions as a cancellation order against the invisible supply that the visible condition was never designed to govern. The corrective law, the law that Shinn taught and that this teaching has been building toward, is this: divine supply is active, and I refuse to cancel it with fear. This sentence contains everything the receiving field needs. It declares the present reality of supply at the level of the invisible law. It identifies the fear sentence as a cancellation rather than an honest report, and it places the receiver in active authority over the cancellation rather than passive submission to it. I refuse. Not I'm trying to avoid it. Not I hope the fear goes away. I refuse. This is the word of command. This is the spoken declaration of spiritual authority over the fear sentence. And this declaration, spoken at the moment the fear sentence rises, is the interruption that changes the field. The fear signal, the moment when the fear sentence begins to rise in response to a visible appearance, is also the moment of the greatest spiritual opportunity. It is the moment when the choice between cancellation and command is most available, most consequential, and most transformative. The fear sentence rises, and you stand at the fork. You can speak it, and the cancellation continues. Or you can recognize it as the fear signal, name it for what it is, refuse it the authority of your voice, and speak the command that agrees with supply instead. The fear signal is not an enemy. It is an indicator. It is the marker that tells you exactly where the interruption must happen and exactly when the faith declaration must be spoken. The fear signal is the invitation to practice, and the practice, repeated faithfully, reshapes the receiving field, one interrupted cancellation at a time. The freedom that this recognition brings is genuine and significant. You do not have to stop feeling afraid in order to stop speaking fear. The emotion of fear may rise, the anxiety may be real, the financial pressure may be severe, but the spoken word is under your authority regardless of the emotion. You can feel afraid and speak supply. You can feel anxious and speak trust. You can feel uncertain and declare divine order. The feeling does not have to govern the spoken order, and when the spoken order consistently rises above the emotional level, when the command of faith is spoken in the presence of the fear rather than waiting for the fear to pass, something begins to change at the emotional level as well. The body responds to the spoken command. The nervous system begins to calm around the declared supply. The emotion follows the word eventually. When the word is spoken with enough consistency and enough authority to become the dominant signal in the receiving field. The correction practice is straightforward, and its simplicity is intentional. The simpler the practice, the more likely it will be applied in the actual moments of pressure when the fear sentence rises. Complex protocols are abandoned under pressure. Simple ones survive. And this correction practice has only 6 steps, and they can be completed in under a minute, in the middle of any situation, under any financial pressure, at any time the fear sentence appears. The first step is to catch the fear sentence. This is the step that everything else depends on. You cannot interrupt what you have not noticed. And because the fear sentence has been so habitual, so automatic, so deeply embedded in the daily speech of the receiving field, catching it requires a degree of inner listening that is itself a form of spiritual practice. Begin to listen to your own sentences. Begin to notice which ones carry the structure of the fear signal. Begin to hear the moment when the visible world provokes a declaration against the invisible supply. Catching the sentence is not an act of self-criticism. It is an act of spiritual awareness. You are becoming the guardian of your own spoken order, and guardianship begins with noticing what has been entering the field unchallenged. The second step is to say, cancel that order. Not to yourself with guilt, not with shame about having spoken the fear sentence again, but with the calm authority of a person who understands the law of spoken words and is exercising their right to withdraw a cancellation they just placed. Cancel that order. This internal declaration is the formal act of withdrawing the fear sentence from the field of receiving. It does not erase the fact that the sentence was spoken, but it withdraws the creative authority of the spoken order before it can consolidate into a standing agreement. The moment the sentence is recognized and the cancellation is withdrawn, the field is available again for the command of faith to enter. The third step is to speak the divine replacement sentence, not whispered, not merely thought, spoken even if quietly. Speak it with as much sincerity and conviction as you can bring to it in the moment of pressure. Divine supply is active, or the way is opening, or right channels are forming, or I am guided, supplied, and ready to receive. Choose the replacement that most directly addresses the specific fear sentence that just rose. Say it aloud if circumstances allow. Say it internally with full intention if the circumstances require. But speak it. The spoken word carries the authority. The thought alone does not place the same order into the receiving field that the spoken declaration does. Shinn's law is the law of the spoken word. The speaking is not optional. The fourth step is to relax the body. After speaking the replacement sentence, consciously release the physical tension that the fear sentence created. Soften the shoulders, slow the breath, unclench the hands. Allow the body to respond to the spoken command of supply rather than remaining contracted around the fear sentence that was just cancelled. This physical act is not mere relaxation. It is the body entering the receiving state that the spoken command authorized. The body must agree with the spoken order. A body still contracted around a fear sentence cannot fully receive the supply that the spoken command of faith is authorizing. Relax, and let the body become the open receiving vessel that the faith declaration describes. The fifth step is to take one action that agrees with supply, not a massive action, not an action that requires certainty or perfect conditions, just the nearest available action that the open receiving field, freed from the fear sentence's contraction, makes visible. Answer the message, make the call, write the proposal, say yes to the conversation. Notice the person in front of you. Test the door that appears. Do one thing that moves in the direction of the supply you have declared active. This action is the embodiment of the spoken order. It tells the invisible delivery system that the receiver is not merely speaking faith, but moving in faith. And the movement in faith is what the system uses as the confirmation signal that the delivery is expected and the receiver is prepared. The sixth step is to repeat until the new sentence becomes natural. This practice is not a one-time exercise, it is a training. The fear sentence became natural through repetition. The command of faith becomes natural through the same mechanism. Every time the fear sentence rises and is caught and cancelled and replaced, the new sentence gains a small amount of ground in the receiving field. Every time the replacement is spoken in the pressure moment, under the exact conditions that use to automatically produce the fear sentence, the new sentence strengthens its position in the inner agreement. And over days and weeks and months of consistent practice, the relationship shifts. The fear sentence no longer arrives first. The replacement sentence begins to be the sentence the mouth reaches for automatically when the visible world provokes a response. The field has been retrained. The agreement has been changed. The receiving is restored. You are becoming something new, not because your visible circumstances have fully changed yet, not because every fear sentence has been permanently silenced, but because a decision has been made in the hearing of this teaching to refuse to let fear speak the final order over your supply. That decision is an identity decision. It is a declaration of who you are in relation to divine supply from this point forward. And this new identity has a name. You are a guardian of spoken supply. You are a person who understands that the mouth is a creative instrument, that every sentence spoken over your financial life is an order placed into the field of receiving, and that you hold the authority to choose which orders your mouth places. This is not a small thing. It is the most significant spiritual shift a receiver of divine supply can make. The new identity speaks in new sentences. I do not cancel divine supply with fear. This is the foundational statement of the new financial identity. It does not say, I never feel afraid. It does not say, I never feel the fear sentence rise. It says, I do not let the fear sentence speak the final order. I catch it, I cancel it, I replace it. I guard the field of my receiving from the cancellation orders that have governed it for too long. This is who I am now. This is the spiritual discipline I have accepted. And this discipline is not a burden. It is the release of the greatest burden I have been carrying, the burden of speaking against my own supply every day, while praying for it with the same mouth. My words agree with Source. This second statement of the new identity places the spoken word in alignment with the highest available authority, the Source itself. Not with the bank account, not with the visible conditions, not with the history of closed channels and delayed supply, with the Source. And the Source has never declared that this person's supply has been withdrawn. The Source has never spoken a sentence of permanent lack over this life. Every sentence of lack that has been spoken over this financial life has come from the receiver, not from the Source. And the new identity refuses to continue that pattern. My words agree with Source. My spoken order aligns with divine supply. My mouth speaks from the invisible law rather than from the visible appearance. I speak supply before proof appears. This third statement is the most radical declaration of the new identity, and it is the one that distinguishes faith from mere wishful thinking. Anyone can speak supply after the bank account fills. Anyone can declare divine provision after the unexpected check arrives. The spiritual work, the certain way that Shinn described, is to speak supply before the proof appears, to say divine supply is active before the channel is visible, to say the way is opening before the door is in sight, to say I am guided, supplied and ready to receive before any confirmation has arrived in the visible world. This is the identity of faith as a spoken law, and this identity, maintained consistently, is what creates the inner agreement that divine supply can deliver through. The new financial identity also changes the relationship with money itself. In the old identity, money was something that came and went unpredictably, something to be anxious about, something to protect from its own tendency to disappear. In the new identity, money is a channel of divine supply, one visible form through which the inexhaustible Source expresses provision. It is not the supply itself. The supply is in the Source. Money is the delivery. And a delivery received from a delivery system trusted completely, received from a source whose supply never runs out, is money received differently. It is held differently. It is multiplied differently. It is not clung to in panic or released in fear. It is managed from the inner posture of a person who knows the Source provides, who has spoken that truth consistently, and who therefore receives money as confirmation of a law they have been honoring, rather than as a lucky exception to a life of declared lack. The guardian of spoken supply also becomes a guardian of the spiritual environment they inhabit. They notice when others speak fear sentences in their presence. They notice the effect those sentences have on their own receiving field. They do not judge the people speaking the fear sentences because they have been exactly there, speaking exactly those sentences for exactly those reasons. But they quietly, internally cancel the order that the fear sentence placed, replace it with the faith declaration, and hold the field of divine supply open in the shared space. They become a stabilizing spiritual force, not through dramatic gesture, but through the simple, consistent practice of guarding the spoken word in every environment they occupy. This is the legacy of the Masters, transmitted through a new generation of receivers who understand the law. What this teaching has revealed is built on a law older than any modern system and deeper than any visible financial strategy. Florence Scovel Shinn knew this law and spent her life transmitting it to people who were living under the weight of the exact financial fear that you are familiar with today. The law has not changed. The human experience of financial pressure has not changed. And the correction the law offers has not changed. This recap is not a summary. It is a consolidation, the gathering of the teaching into a clear, memorable form that the receiver can carry forward from this moment. Fear sentences sound realistic. This is the first truth to carry forward. The fear sentence does not announce itself as a cancellation order. It arrives dressed as honest assessment, as grounded realism, as the responsible response of a person who has learned not to expect too much. And because it sounds honest, it is spoken unchallenged. It passes through the mouth without interruption, because the receiver does not yet have the spiritual framework to recognize it as an agreement with absence. Now you have that framework. Now you know what the sentence is doing, beneath the surface of its realistic language, and you will never be able to hear it again without also hearing the cancellation order it carries. Words are orders. This is the second truth. Every word spoken with sincere belief is an order placed into the field of receiving. Not a wish, not a preference, an order. And the field of receiving honors what is ordered, not what is hoped for, not what is believed in silence, but what is spoken with conviction into the shared space of the receiver's daily life. The prayer orders supply, the fear sentence orders absence, and the field responds to both with equal faithfulness. Words are orders, and the receiver is responsible for the orders they place. Repetition strengthens the order. This is the third truth. One fear sentence does not permanently cancel divine supply. But a fear sentence spoken daily, spoken under pressure, spoken across months and years, creates a standing order that governs the receiving field as thoroughly as any single definitive declaration. And the correction is the same. Repetition of the replacement sentence. The faith declaration must be spoken with as much frequency, as much consistency, and as much conviction as the fear sentence has been spoken. Not because the law requires exhausting effort, but because the inner agreement was built through repetition, and the new agreement must be built the same way. Fear cancels receiving. This is the fourth truth. The mechanism has been explained in full. The fear sentence, spoken at the moment when the visible world presents an appearance of lack, contracts the receiving field, narrows perception, dismisses channels, rejects deliveries, and withdraws the confirmation signal that divine supply requires to complete its movement from invisible to visible. Fear does not merely reflect lack. Fear creates it through the creative authority of the spoken word, through the law that Shinn taught and demonstrated and transmitted to everyone who was willing to receive it. Divine speech restores agreement. This is the fifth truth. The correction is available. The agreement that has been broken by fear sentences can be restored through the spoken command of faith. Divine supply is active, spoken sincerely, spoken consistently, spoken in the pressure, in the delay, in the silence, in the presence of the visible world's most insistent appearance of lack. Each speaking of the faith declaration is an act of restoration. Each caught and cancelled fear sentence is a withdrawal of the standing cancellation order. And the accumulation of these acts, practiced faithfully over days and weeks, rebuilds the inner agreement that keeps the receiving field open for the completion of divine supply's delivery. The sentence must be interrupted quickly. This is the sixth truth, and it is the most practical. The longer the fear sentence runs unchallenged, the more authority it accumulates in the receiving field. The moment of interruption is the moment after the fear sentence rises, not the moment after it has been repeated 3 times, not the hour after it has set the tone for the whole day. The moment immediately after it rises is the moment of maximum power for the interruption. Catch it early, cancel it immediately, speak the replacement without delay. The speed of the interruption is part of the spiritual discipline. The guardian of spoken supply does not let the fear sentence settle. They intercept it at the threshold, withdraw the cancellation order before it can consolidate, and restore the agreement with divine supply before the receiving field has had time to configure itself around the declared absence. You do not need to be perfect. This teaching is not calling you to a standard of flawless speech, to a life entirely free of fear sentences, to a spiritual discipline so rigorous that the normal human experience of financial anxiety has been eliminated. The correction Shinn offered was not perfection. It was speed. Not the absence of the fear sentence, but the speed of its interruption. Not a life without the rising of fear, but a life where fear is not allowed to place a standing order before the faith declaration intercepts it. You do not need to never speak fear. You need to catch it fast and cancel it fast. That is the practice. That is the sustainable discipline. That is the form of spiritual mouth guarding that is actually available to a person living under real financial pressure. You also need fast correction, not endless self-recrimination. When the fear sentence escapes, when it passes through the mouth before the interception could happen, when a whole hour or a whole day has been spent speaking from fear before the awareness returned to the law, the response is not guilt, the response is correction. Cancel that order. Speak the replacement. Return to the agreement. Begin again. The field of receiving is not permanently damaged by a few fear sentences spoken by a person who was genuinely in distress. The field responds to the current predominant agreement, not to a past perfect record. Return to the command of faith. Restore the agreement. Let the correction be simple, fast and free of the self-condemnation that itself can become a form of declared unworthiness, which is its own fear sentence spoken against the self. A fear sentence can be cancelled the moment it is recognized. This is the mercy at the center of Shinn's teaching. The law of words is not punitive, it is responsive. The moment the fear sentence is recognized and the cancellation is withdrawn, the field begins to respond to the new spoken order. There is no penalty period. There is no mandatory waiting time between the interruption and the restoration of the receiving field's openness. The moment you say, cancel that order, and speak the replacement sincerely, the field responds. The agreement shifts. The receiving posture opens. It may be small at first. The long habit of the fear sentence does not dissolve in a single moment of correction, but the correction is real. The shift is real. And every moment of fast correction, every intercepted fear sentence, every sincere speaking of divine supply is active, is a real movement in the field of receiving, moving it in the direction of the open, expectant, prepared condition from which divine supply can complete its delivery to the person who has finally, consistently, and sincerely stopped declaring its absence. The source has not withdrawn your supply. This is the reassurance that this teaching has been building toward, and it must be spoken clearly before the closing. The season of lack, the silence, the closed channels, the delayed provision. None of these are the source declaring that your supply has been permanently withdrawn. They are the visible evidence of a receiving field that has been contracted by repeated fear sentences. Not the source's verdict on your worthiness, not the source's response to your faith, not the source's limitation or indifference. The source's supply is inexhaustible. It is still authorized, it is still available. It is still moving through invisible channels toward the receiving end of your life. What has been missing is not supply. What has been missing is a consistently open receiving field. And that field can be opened right now, with the next spoken word, with the next interrupted fear sentence, with the next sincere declaration that divine supply is active and that you refuse to cancel it with fear. The masters left their teaching because they knew this struggle. Shinn worked with real people in real financial crises. She knew what the fear sentence sounded like in a person who had been waiting too long and hoping too quietly, and speaking too much fear over too many prayers. She knew the exhaustion of it. She knew the dignity of the person caught in the trap of the false safety. She knew that the correction was not easy, but that it was available and that it worked, and that the law was real. And the teaching she left behind, transmitted now through this channel in this moment, is her response to your specific pain. To the person who has been speaking, nothing is coming, for longer than they want to admit. To the person who has prayed with faith in the morning and cancelled the prayer with fear by afternoon. To the person who has rejected deliveries because fear dressed them as disappointment. To you, the correction is here. The law is still operating. The supply is still authorized, and your next spoken word can be the beginning of the delivery completing. You are capable of this. Not the perfection, but the practice. Not the endless freedom from fear, but the consistent interruption of the fear sentence at the moment of its rising. You have the spiritual capacity for this. You have the willingness, evidenced by the fact that you are still here, still receiving this teaching, still looking for the correction that will finally shift the field in the direction of the provision you have been praying for. The willingness is enough to begin. The practice is enough to sustain. The law is enough to deliver. And divine supply is active right now, waiting for the receiving field of a person who has decided to stop declaring its absence and to begin, one spoken word at a time, to restore the agreement that allows the delivery to complete. For the next 7 days, you are invited to take the challenge that this teaching has been preparing you for. The challenge is simple in its statement and profound in its application. Every time the fear sentence rises, every time the automatic response to visible lack or delay or silence begins to form in the mouth, before it can complete its cancellation order, say this: divine supply is active, and I refuse to cancel it with fear. Say it sincerely. Say it with the authority of a person who understands the law that governs spoken orders. Say it in the pressure, in the morning calculation, in the afternoon anxiety, in the late-night fear that arrives when the day's visible results have not matched the day's prayers. Say it every single time the fear sentence rises, without exception, without negotiation, without allowing the fear sentence to finish its order before the interruption arrives. The second part of the challenge is this: write down the old sentence and the new sentence. On paper or in whatever form you record things, write the specific fear sentence that you most commonly speak. Write it clearly, name it precisely, and directly beneath it, write the replacement sentence that agrees with divine supply. Read both sentences daily. Let the old sentence's name be the trigger for the new sentence's declaration. When the old sentence rises, as it will, the writing of it will have already prepared your mouth with the replacement. This is not a journaling exercise in the casual sense. It is a written spoken order. It is the documentation of a decision. This is the sentence I have been speaking, and this is the sentence I now authorize to govern my receiving field instead. The written declaration has authority. Let it have authority in your life for these 7 days. The 7 days are not the full transformation. They are the beginning of it. The fear sentence was built through years of repetition. The faith declaration will require consistent practice to achieve the same level of inner authority. But 7 days of disciplined interruption, 7 days of catching the fear sentence and speaking the replacement, 7 days of protecting the receiving field from the cancellation order, 7 days of saying, divine supply is active, and I refuse to cancel it with fear, will produce a measurable shift in the inner agreement. You will notice by the 7th day that the replacement sentence comes faster, that the fear sentence feels less automatic, that the gap between the fear sentence's rising and the interruption shortens, that something in the receiving field has begun to open in a way it was not open before the challenge began. The challenge is an act of faith, not a guarantee of a specific visible outcome. Do not take the challenge expecting that by the 7th day the bank account will be full, or the specific channel you have been waiting for will have opened. Take the challenge because you understand the law, because you know that the inner agreement that has been governing your receiving field must change before the visible results can change. Because you know that 7 days of consistent faith declarations, interrupting 7 days of fear sentences, is 7 days of laying a new foundation in the field of receiving. What builds on that foundation over the days and weeks and months that follow is what divine supply has been preparing all along, waiting for a receiver who had finally stopped cancelling the delivery long enough for the channel to complete. Now is the moment when your spoken word becomes part of this teaching's record. In the comments below this video, write your replacement sentence. Write the sentence of divine supply that you are authorizing to replace the fear sentence that has been governing your receiving field. Write it as your declaration. Write it as your spoken order. Write it as the sentence that the next 7 days and the days beyond will be built on. Write, divine supply is active. Or write the specific replacement sentence that this teaching surfaced for you. Let the comment be the spoken order. Let the writing be the declaration. Let the field of receiving record what your mouth has decided to agree with from this moment forward. This is your first public act as a guardian of spoken supply. You came to this teaching carrying a sentence you had been speaking over your life, over your finances, over your prayers. You may have been carrying it so long that it felt like the truth rather than an agreement. You may have been speaking it with such consistency that it felt like a description of who you are rather than a decision you could reverse. But you have now heard the law. You have now seen the mechanism. You have now understood what has been happening beneath the surface of your prayers, at the level of your spoken word, in the field of your own receiving, and you cannot unhear it. The awareness is now yours, and the awareness creates the responsibility and the power to choose differently. What began at the opening of this teaching with a warning has become by its closing an invitation. The warning was this: one sentence you are speaking may be cancelling the divine supply you are praying for. That warning was not meant to produce shame. It was meant to produce recognition. And the recognition it was meant to produce is this: the sentence can be changed. The agreement can be restored. The receiving field can be reopened. The cancellation that has been repeating across days and weeks and months can be withdrawn in a single moment of spiritual authority, followed by a new spoken order, followed by the consistent practice of speaking that order every time the fear sentence rises to reclaim its place in the field. Florence Scovel Shinn spent her life fighting for the receiving field of people who prayed with genuine faith and then cancelled their prayers with genuine fear. She understood that the people she worked with were not faithless. They were unaware. They did not know that the word that followed the prayer carried the same creative authority as the prayer itself. They did not know that the fear sentence spoken in anxiety placed a real order into a real field that responded with real precision. But now you know, and knowing changes the spiritual responsibility. You are no longer excused from the law by ignorance of it. You are invited into it with full awareness, and the invitation is this: speak supply, guard the word, cancel the fear before it cancels the supply, and let the source complete the delivery that has been authorized since the moment you first prayed in sincerity. One sentence was canceling your supply, and now one sentence restores the agreement. The sentence is not complicated. The sentence is not exclusive to people of a particular background, a particular level of spiritual advancement, or a particular financial history. The sentence is available to you right now, in the exact visible conditions you are currently inhabiting, before anything has changed, before any proof has arrived, before any channel has opened visibly. The sentence is spoken from the invisible law rather than from the visible appearance. The sentence is an act of faith as a spoken order. And the sentence is this: divine supply is active. Speak it now. Speak it in 7 days. Speak it every time the fear sentence rises to claim your mouth and your receiving field. And let the Master's law, transmitted through their teaching, honored through your practice, complete its full work in the life of a receiver who has finally decided to stop declaring the absence of the very supply that has been waiting all along to arrive. Do not let fear speak the final order. Divine supply is active, and your words must agree with it.